So guys, what if Naruto was in high school? DxD and Kunua's slave special movie. The fourth great ninja war had reached its peak. Everyone in the world was currently under the infinite Tsukiyomi, leaving Team 7 to fighting the real mastermind and final villain. Kagaya Otsutsuki was revived after centuries of being locked away. Black Zetsu secure and talking shit to the best bros of Team 7, Naruto and Sasuke, while Kakashi and Sakura helped when they could. Obito was not part of the picture as Kagaya snuck an ash bone dagger through a portal to the back of the Uchiha criminal's head. She really wasn't approving of his whole reasonings of bringing her back, just so he could get back with a minor while he was a grown adult. The horned celestial woman had dragged the four fighters to another world, this one barren as she had to admit. The two young men were quite the pair, coupled with the pin cat and the teacher they could topple her. In the middle of swatting attacks and dodging hits, Kagaya's mind was struck by a flash of white, causing her to stumble mid-fight. Seeing this as an opening, Team 7 lunged in, Kakashi and Sakura to immobilize, while Naruto and Sasuke ready to seal her way. Before they could, Kagaya lashed out with a wave of power that threw all of them back, hands coming to her head as she let out a groan. Her mind flashing through images of past, present and a future threatened by a person she was wary of. "Mother, what's wrong?" Zetsu asked as he peeked out from the hood to her. Sasuke and Sakura saw this moment to strike, but Naruto's chakra limbs had grabbed and rooted them down, as Naruto himself was cautious but curious. Normally he would join in on the moment to take down the evil woman, but something was making him have second thoughts. Kagaya let out a sigh as she raised her gaze and focused on Naruto specifically. With a finger pointed to him, she said only a few words. "I'd like a moment with you, boy." With that she vanished in a burst of speed, appearing right before the group and sending out chakra fists to push away Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura. As she grabbed Naruto before he could react, a portal consumed them, both leaving the trio alone. "Well shit," Kakashi muttered as he feared what Kagaya was doing to Naruto as Sasuke and Sakura had similar thoughts. Kagaya's personal home. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he found himself staring at a wooden ceiling. Finding himself in a nice bed, the sheets and mattress leagues better than his apartment had liked to admit, sitting up as he noticed he wasn't in Sage of Six Paths mode. His jacket was on the rack by the door, and his sandals were not on either. Getting out of the bed, he looked through the open space that was the window to see a forest of bamboo, as far as the eye could see. "Great, now, where am I?" he asked as he then felt something nudge his foot and looked down to see a white rabbit. Said critter moved to the doorway and looked back to him. As Naruto picked up the motion to follow it, he found himself in a castle. But the architecture was older than the ones like Hizuki Castle that he knew of. There were few decorations here and there, and paintings of worlds and stars that made him curious. Was Kagaya from beyond the stars? Soon enough the rabbit led him to a room that had a balcony with a greater view of the bamboo forest, showing the sky was clear and the distant mountain ranges were topped with snow. His attention was to the person sitting and watching said view, her back turned to him as he frowned and went into Sasuke mode. "I did not bring you here to turn my house into a battle zone, child. I ask that you take a seat and listen to my words, please." Now that threw Naruto in a loop as he returned to normal. Just now noticing the wooden box that was beside Kagaya and shaking as he sensed Zetsu within it, he walked over and sat down beside the woman hailed as a goddess and a monster. She was enjoying some brewed tea and offered him some that he accepted, both looking over the beauty of nature before them as Naruto had questions. Loads of questions to be honest. "I suppose I should explain why I started this, my descent into madness and subjugating humanity to become my servants. I hail from the Otsutsuki, a clan of celestial horned beings that travel the dimensions in search of what we call god trees. We cultivate and harvest their fruit to gain the immense powers granted from the divine food. To us, power is the only law. No concept of love or bonds as you like to preach. When I arrived to this world for the tree, I had the same mindset, gather for the clan and become a god. But my time among the humans had my goals shift and change. Motherhood had me wanting something for my children, who would be put to the sword due to their hybrid lineage, of course. Over time I grew more paranoid and with my Otsutsuki clansmen still out there, I took harsher actions to safeguard my home," she explained as Naruto was getting the picture. "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," he muttered out as he was understanding the woman. She sipped her tea and continued, not minding Black Zetsu shaking in his cage as he was not able to talk right now. "I grew corrupted with my power and my dreams of peace and a home for my boys was shattered. I may be the princess of the clan, but they are quick to off those who stray from their goals of ascension. I had formed the Zetsu army, knowing that they would arrive sooner or later. Hagoromo and Homura finding out along with my mental instability is what set everything else in motion. However, as I look upon you, I see a chance," she said as she shifted her full body to face him, her third eye closed as Naruto was puzzled. "A chance for what exactly?" This has Kagaya smile, not that sinister smile from before when she was revived, but a genuine smile, looked better than the other one. "Life to flourish and to put a stop to my clan. I won't mince words when I say we are a clan of parasites. The god trees themselves are not of our making. We harvest their spoils for ourselves. While growing and consuming one fruit is worth hundreds and thousands of lives, the population can overcome and fill up the losses over time from the harvest of one fruit. However, continuous harvesting of the tree strips away all life on the world, everything dies, and the planet along with the tree is just a barren and withered husk of mass, floating through the vastness of space, and we just move on, searching for more trees and fruits to claim, while ending entire worlds and races on petty superiority. She finished as she set her cup down and averted her gaze from Naruto. The blonde teen was processing all this as he was now starting to sympathize with her. She had her beliefs changed and wanted to do things different but succumbed to her own darkness. He gently reached out and placed his hand over hers. It'll do it, it'll help you stand against your crony friends who think they can take what they want and hurt others without care, he declared with determination in his eyes. Kagaya looked back to him with a look of admiration. Just how much did she hide behind the stone-cold facade? What came next surprised them both as Kagaya leaned in and kissed him, not on the forehead or cheek, on his lips. It felt nice, way better than the one he had with Sasuke a while back, which was an accident. It was a moment before the two realized what was happening and they separated, both looking away and apologizing. Sorry, I don't know what came over me. No worries, I'm the one who jumped in. Both were blushing as they gave a glance to each other. But it was nice, Kagaya said as they stared a bit more, then leaned in to engage in another kiss, this one growing deeper as Kagaya let her royal face drop, and centuries of confinement and loneliness bubbled up. For Naruto it was as if he was getting the chance to relax. The fate of the world was not in jeopardy and he can kick back for a break. She teleported the two of them to her personal bedroom as things got hotter and clothes were stripped, hands were roaming and tongues mingling. Jiraiya would be so jealous. Later, after an unspecified moment of time of nothing but carnal desires unleashed, Kagaya and Naruto were back in the room from before, both clothed again, but obviously had enjoyed the actions earlier very much. After the sex, the two learned a bit more about each other while they lay in the bed together in embrace. Naruto found out that Kagaya's former love was quick to turn on her and have her hunted down for peace, reminded him of the Akatsuki. Kagaya learned that Naruto felt alone despite all his friends and comrades. His family was taken on the night of his birth, thanks to Obito. Right now, the Otsutsuki princess was back in the room with him, both looking none less for wear besides a light glow to them. Kagaya placed her hands in a prayer pose and closed her eyes as Naruto remained silent and watched. What are you doing? He asked after a few moments of silence, only to be slapped in the back of his head by some of her long hair and without a beat, she replied without breaking her stance. Calling upon a friend, she replied as Naruto noticed a flicker of sparks in the air which grew bigger, forming a large portal showing a set of old yet holy looking castle gates. Naruto could feel raw power coming from the other side as the gates opened and a woman stepped through and into Kagaya's domain, walking on air no less. To saw she was pretty would be selling it short. She was very beautiful, add in the regal air she carried as well. She looked at Kagaya with eyes full of disappointment as the portal closed behind her. You have the nerve to pray to me after what you were doing to these people you wanted to protect from your siblings. Her voice stopped as she noticed Naruto sitting there, confused out of his damn mind between some unknown history between the two ladies. Instantly her regal and cold mood changed to a mix of annoyed and surprise as her hand moved from her sword on her hip to pointing to him as Kagaya put her hands down and opened her eyes to look to her visitor. What is he doing here? I brought him with Lady Amaterasu, Kagaya said. I can clearly see that, but why did you bring him here? Mortals are not allowed to meet directly with the gods, Amaterasu said as Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. Kagaya let out an uncharacteristic sigh at this. That law is broken, and you know it as well as I do. The other gods and their pantheons don't even give two damns about it and frolic about on the mortal planes for their own amusement and machinations, Kagaya retorted as Amaterasu had to admit she was right there. Naruto cleared his throat as he spoke up before things could escalate. Should I go before things get messy? He asked awkwardly as he felt there was bad blood between Kagaya and Amaterasu and was going to leave the room, but was rooted to the spot by Kagaya's hair. Amaterasu glanced to Naruto, then back to Kagaya as she took a seat and summoned a bottle of sake and a few cups for them. That won't be necessary, Naruto, I summoned her here to help us, the rabbit goddess told him as he just shrugged and figured to keep his mouth shut for now. Kagaya poured out the sake for her guests as Amaterasu sat down and accepted her cup, Naruto sipping his as his eyes darted between the two. And what exactly do you suppose I help you with? You're not on my graces for your little stunt, princess, Amaterasu drawled out with a disapproving look on her face as Naruto could feel heat radiating off her, like standing right next to a fire to be honest. Kagaya downed her cup in one go and poured another, holding it in her hand as she looked to Amaterasu in the eyes as milky lavender met golden honey. The end of the Otsutsuki, she answered as this made Naruto's eyebrows shoot up in surprise as he gulped his drink down the wrong pipe, turning away to clear his throat as Amaterasu was curious. She downed her cup and was given more as Naruto came back and asked, wait, do you mean to seal them away? Naruto asked at first before seeing Kagaya shake her head. No, we've done so much harm to the cosmos and will not stop unless forced. It's time the clan was dealt with for good. Seals would only work for so long. Naruto got the memo, as he was wondering how the hell was this gonna be a thing. He and the team could barely survive Kagaya fresh off her return, but a whole clan? This is new, and here I thought you were on their side the whole time, Ami said as she continued. So how do you propose the destruction of your own clan, Kagaya? You care for this world so much that you've made it your home and don't wish to leave it unattended, and your family are quite slippery to get a hold of, she asked as Kagaya looked to Naruto and Ami also looked to him, then back to Kagaya. Naruto will hunt them, as for how he is to stand against my brethren, he will need power. I believe the world you watch over with the other gods could be a suitable place to let Naruto grow, won't you agree? She suggested as Amaterasu thought it over for a bit with finger to chin as she soon agreed. You have a point, very well I shall see to it that he is transported there, in turn you will stay and watch over his world, no enslavement, am I clear? Kagaya nodded and bowed to Amaterasu. You humble me with your generosity, Lady Amaterasu, she answered. Don't be a suck-up, princess, the god quipped as she turned to Naruto and sized him up, focusing on the seal on his palm, along with sensing the will of Asura Otsutsuki mingled within his chakra core. She addresses him directly now, Naruto Uzumaki, where you are going is not as kind as this world. You will deal with far more dangerous threats than the Akatsuki and beings of greater power to surpass even Kagaya and myself. Potentially you might change for better or worse, I cannot say how. Do you accept the task set before you? Amaterasu asked Naruto as she stared into his eyes, sizing up the young man before her as Naruto thought this over for a bit. He was so close to finishing the fight and getting to the dream of peace that Jiraiya had passed on to him, but with this new information, the threat Kagaya's kin posed raised even more concerns. Kagaya was already a huge threat to him and Sasuke at their peak powers as they could barely keep up. Her change of minds at heart recently was a nice turn as she wanted his help. There would be no point to attaining peace for the shinobi world if another Otsutsuki potentially stronger than Kagaya would arrive and cause chaos. Hell, he knew he and Sasuke would not survive against the rest of her clan if they were to arrive in larger numbers rather than her single visit, but that raised another question. This mission will be of utmost secrecy, Naruto, not even your friends, no matter how close, cannot know of your pact with me. A cover story will suffice in deterring their attempts to uncover anything regarding our involvement, Kagaya said as she had made a chakra connection with Naruto earlier and had sensed his concern before he even voiced it. Naruto raised an eyebrow but made sense of her words. Team 7 still saw her as a threat and any news of his willingness to even listen let alone to help her would be taken the wrong way, letting out a sigh as he knew he couldn't say anything to his friends about what he was doing. He closed his eyes and inhaled before opening them and slamming a fist into his open palm with a determined look on his face. Only one way to go and get stronger to face the real threat. Alright, I'll do it, as long as I can protect my friends. I don't care how many places I have to go to, he replied with his tone full of determination and eyes blazing with worth. Kagaya and Amaterasu smiled at him as the sun goddess reached into her sleeve and brought out a small hand mirror, tossing it forward as it enlarged and glowed with several shifting rune circles along the surface. Naruto watched in awe as the glowing runes faded away and the mirror surface grew darker, almost like staring into space with the small dots of light he could see. Seeing his slight confusion and awe, Amaterasu cleared her throat as she spoke. My mirror will take you to the world my domain currently watches over. It is quite different from your world in terms of mankind and other forces. Naruto saw a world come into view as she talked, still fascinated about the logic of life out there among the stars. The mirror then cracked and shattered, the shards flying out and around the mirror itself as they glowed with power, and the now broken mirror pane showed a wispy vortex, a portal. Kagaya and Amaterasu looked to the portal, then back to him as the sun goddess smiled. Before I can send you on your way, young man, you have to give up your power, she stated as Naruto was confused by this, but thankfully Kagaya explained, when Ashura and Indra killed each other in their sibling rivalry, their powers rooted themselves to this world as the reincarnation cycle you are a part of. As such you'll feel an undeniable urge to remain here and come back if we had taken you off world, same as with these tailed children Hagoromo had created from my power, and all living beings tied to chakra. The belief of you being unable to live without chakra is not true, as mankind had existed before my arrival and Hagoromo's gift. As such, stripping you of your chakra will not harm or kill you, but it will leave you severely weakened. Hopefully you can find a way to amass your own power and build yourself back up, if not surpass what you have achieved with chakra alone. She reached and placed a hand on his head as he felt himself getting sleepy and heard both women say in unison, we wish you good fortune in the fights to come. Naruto was out of it before he even hit the floor, but was held up by an invisible force as he floated between Rabbit Goddess and Sun Goddess. His shirt was moved up and Kagaya held a hand over his torso as she began draining the chakra from Naruto's body, the golden energy coming from Naruto and forming a sphere above him. Took a bit, but he was drained dry, looking a bit paler than his usual complexion as Kagaya then removed his headband and tucked that in her sleeve sleeve as his chakra floated beside her. Amaterasu looked over Naruto as she tapped his forehead and added a small amount of her power into his body to keep him safe while traveling through the portal, as humans can't travel like supernatural beings do unless they wish to die by the raw power tearing them to atoms. Kagaya moved and placed a kiss on Naruto's forehead and spoke in a gentle tone, "Be safe, Naruto Uzumaki." And with that, Naruto was sent through the portal and disappeared from view as the glass reformed onto the mirror before it shrank back to its regular size, and Amaterasu put it back in her sleeve. "Now what do you plan to do with that?" the god asked as Kagaya let the orb float before her before she replied, "I plan to return it to the earth, put a stop to the sibling rivalry that has persisted for centuries, and end the reincarnation cycle. Will you allow me to make amends for my failure?" Amaterasu thought for a moment before she reached and tapped Kagaya on her third eye, making it close on reflex, and then tapped the sphere as an inner silver light filled the core. "When you return, you will find that Naruto's chakra mixed with Ashura's will have better results when returned to the planet. Also, you will release the tailed beasts from your chakra, they have earned their existence," she commanded as Kagaya bowed and was about to take her leave, while Amaterasu opened a portal back to her home. "Oh, and Kagaya, I will grant you this second chance, don't muck it up like before, and be sure to raise the sun skyward. Till our next meeting. Bunny Princes. She smiled to the pale Otsutsuki with a light chuckle before the portal closed and she vanished from view. Kagaya was interrupted from her moment of calm when the box containing Black Zetsu rattled and he let out a snarl. "Let me out of this box, mother." His demand was answered as she shot an ash bone spike that skewered the box through and BZ as the blob died crumbling to ashes being blown in the wind. With that, the princess of the Otsutsuki clan left her home in one of her portals. Back in the shinobi world, she arrived and looked over the world as the sun began to rise, illuminating the massive collection of cocoons hanging from the roots of the god tree that Madara had activated with a grand illusion. With a snap of her fingers, she opened a small portal that dumped Team 7-Naruto back to the battlefield grounds. With another snap, she had the jutsu cancel as the many dreamers were released from their prisons. The image of the Rin Sharingan over the moon shattering like glass as the night ended and the day emerged. Everyone was coming to as they looked around, while Team 7 looked to the floating Kagaya as she raised her hand and Naruto's chakra above her head. Right in line with the sun as it glowed brightly and grabbed everyone's attention. Without any words or commands, the orb of chakra began pulsating and letting off waves of its power that flowed over the world like a heartbeat. While everyone was feeling the raw warmth and presence from the chakra flowing over them, Kagaya pricked her finger with a nail and let 10 droplets of her blood mixed with her chakra drip below her in a line, the spots convulsing and growing in rapid size as the tailed beasts, including the elusive zero-tailed leech, were returned to the world. Now everyone was confused as they were happy to be alive. The reanimated remaining cages burst into light as all but one remained. The light dispersed to reveal Minato Namikaze was back to his living breathing self. Minato looked over himself in wonder at this miracle when he felt a hand on his shoulder turning him around and pulled into a bone-crushing bear hug. Kushina was also back, as well as she didn't know how, but she felt the presence of her son just before finding herself alive. Kushina Minato uttered out as he hugged his wife as both parents were reunited. Kagaya looked up as she saw many golden lights rain from the heavens to the ground as some emerged from the sealed aware animations and others emerged from the ground. Looks like Naruto's will was more than just peace, but to return those who were unjustly snuffed out. Watching deceased relatives reuniting with family, comrades coming together, felt nice for a change as Kagaya lowered to the ground, only to be met with Sasuke's sword aimed at her. "What did you do to Naruto?" he demanded as that was Naruto's chakra he recognized, but Naruto wasn't with. Kakashi and Sakura were also worried as Kagaya saw all attention was on her now. Time to play her role and cover for her man. I mean Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki made the ultimate choice of giving up his life and chakra to restore the peace to this war-torn world, in the process resurrecting loved ones that had been slain before their time. This shinobi war has come to an end with his choice, and all of you should take this time of peace to rebuild and reconnect, if not for each other, then for the man who brought you all together. She spoke in a tone that held no room for rebuttal, but of course that wasn't enough for Sasuke. Bullshit, how come you have Naruto's chakra and Hess nowhere in sight? The last Uchiha growled out as he was angry. Of course Kagaya just floated over to the young man and moved his sword away with a finger before speaking to him directly, staring into his mismatched eyes as she sensed the lone wolf nature of Indra within his chakra. She also had to put her other grandson to rest. Before anyone could react, her hand came and impacted his sternum in a palm strike, making the Uchiha double over and cough harshly as Kagaya held a small silver-purple sphere having separated the will of Indra Otsutsuki from Sasuke's chakra as she then crushed the orb and watched the ghostly soul fly upwards to join his family in the afterlife, now turning her attention to Sasuke. "Fly home, little sparrow, enjoy your morning grub before the rest of the nest takes it," she said cryptically as Sasuke's eyes widened in understanding before he turned and ran, chakra boosting his speed as he hopped through a portal he opened and closed after him, Sakura calling out to him in worry. Kakashi just patted her head as he then saw Kushina and Minato approach Kagaya. The Uzumaki nodded, all happy and on the verge of tears. "Is it true, is my baby boy really gone?" she asked as Minato held a somber look and supported Kushina, both parents hoping this was some cosmic joke, that their only child gave up his life so they could live again. Kagaya sympathized with the distraught Kushina, but the real story was of utmost secrecy. She reached into her sleeve and brought out Naruto's headband, offering it to the duo as they were crying now, and accepted the only remaining item to remember Naruto by. Minato was quick to pick up Kushina before she collapsed while holding Naruto's headband, as the fourth Hokage took a seat and cradled his wife, seeing her part done. Kagaya turned to leave through a portal when Sakura shouted and got Kagaya to look to her. "How do we know this isn't some trick from you to get our guards down for a surprise attack?" the medic asked, seeing as she was fighting the rabbit goddess earlier, it made sense to ask with a sudden shift to ending the conflict. Before he passed on into the afterlife, Naruto Uzumaki made me vow to never harm the inhabitants of this world, and to let you all live out your lives without the threat of madmen like Obito Uchiha to ruin it all. Seeing as it would be rude to deny a dying man's wish, I accepted his vow and take it upon myself to maintain the order and safety of this world, she replied, before leaving back to her home and vanishing from sight. Now with the early morning shining over the land, the Shinobi Alliance was left to wonder what now and collect their people to return home. While it was majorly a happy time for those revived, Minato and Kushina were heartbroken as they couldn't be a family with their son. Kakashi would approach to try and help his teaching friend, but he was feeling exhaustion and was caught by someone before his knees gave in. "Easy there, Kakashi, you're dealing with chakra exhaustion and you need a nap." A familiar voice filled his ear as he looked in surprise to the young woman holding him, looking to have grown up from the child years they spent together. Arin. But Sasuke arrived back at the leaf from his portal and was still in a dead sprint, hopping and weaving through the village as he made a beeline to the old Uchiha district. Upon entering the ground, he saw a sight he remembered from old memories. His fellow clansmen were alive. Men, women, children and elders were all back and looking none worse for wear. His arrival did catch the attention of the police members as they recognized him. "Is that little Sasuke?" "Hey, it's Sasuke. Has grown up so well." While he would love nothing more than to greet his fellow clan members upon seeing them in the flesh again, he was desperate to see what he desired most. Reaching the main complex and his old home, he stopped at the doors to the clan head's home, taking a breath as he heard muffled noises behind the dusty sliding doors before ripping them open. The young Uchiha was greeted with a sight that had him stunned silent. Sitting at the table was his family, father, mother and brother, and they were in the process of getting breakfast ready when he opened the door. Mikoto's hands went up to her mouth as she recognized her little boy, as Fukagu held his usual impassive look, while Itachi smiled to Sasuke and greeted him. "You look worn out, brother, come sit down, breakfast is almost ready." The older brother spoke as he got up to help Sasuke out, whose eyes were glued on his mom and dad. Before Itachi reached him, he did something unexpected. Sasuke pulled his sword and scabbard from his belt and placed the weapon at his feet and bowing forehead to the wood floor to his parents. Itachi watched the act as he could tell Sasuke was in shock, but didn't say anything as he glanced to Fugaku and Mikoto. Fugaku got up and stood before the prostrating son of his. Moments passed before Fugaku spoke up. "Rise." Father was just as stern and commanding as he remembered. Sasuke picked up his sword as he did as commanded and stared at his father. While he was trying to hold his usual look, it was easy to see he was holding back the tears for his family. Father and son stared each other down before Fugaku shocked Sasuke by pulling him into a hug as Mikoto and Itachi joined in. The dam that held back his emotions since the aftermath of the Uchiha massacre finally broke as Sasuke started to sob and hugged his family back, Mikoto reaching to pet her crying son's head as she spoke softly to soothe him. He did manage to utter out some words through his tears. "Thank you, Naruto." But Naruto, the comatose blonde, was speeding past the stars in a sort of tunnel, comprised of misty silver fog circled by kanji runes. Naruto's form had a small air of ivory shielding from Amataratsu's spell to keep him from being harmed by the vacuum of space and the immense pressure this tunnel applied as he shot through like a bullet, coming upon a world that looked similar to the one he hailed from. Just there were more landmasses spread out over the vast ocean. The tube would have a drop-off point just above the Earth, somewhere in the stratosphere, as he was dumped out and crashed through a planet-encompassing shield over the planet, like a rock going through a window. He went through the divine shield as it reformed after he went through. The still asleep blonde began heating up as he fell to the world. By now the shield of his was faltering a bit as he fell like a comet to the ground as he landed in the waters of one city called London, making a big splash as this caught the attention of its people. The godly power pulled Naruto along underwater and soon he was whisked out and into one of the waterway tunnels that lead to said channel he arrived at. He was gently set down amongst old clothes and trash as the divine shield around him pulsed softly and began to change Naruto's body, unknown to him or even Amaterasu, once done. The shield dissipated away in flakes as he woke up in the damp darkness illuminated by a small lantern. Ah, damn it, don't tell me I slept on the floor again, Naruto muttered as he rubbed his eyes and viewed his surroundings. Great, he was in a shithole. That's when he noticed something off about himself. The hell I'm a kid again. Naruto was back at the age of 7 as he stared and examined his reduced form. In every aspect he was a kid except his mind. He then felt a gnawing absence as he couldn't feel his chakra core or even the presence of the tailed beats. It felt weird as one of his senses was now gone and he was now a chakra-less young kid. He also saw that his signature clothes were ready to just tear apart and worn away as he looked around, spotting the lamp, grabbing the handle as he looked around for any clothes to wear. Luckily, he found some. Unluckily, they were on the rotting corpse of an orphan boy that was being munched on by sewer rats, shooing the rats away with the light of the lantern. He set it down and gave a small sorry as he began undressing the cadaver and cleaning the old clothes off best he could before pulling his worn outfit off and putting the new garments on. It wasn't fitted, but it would do for now as he stared at the body, then his old clothes. He felt bad about robbing the dead and dressed a boy in his old ruined clothes and went to trying stones to the limbs before gently pushing the kid's body into the murky waters of the sewer. He could give a proper burial for the child, but he could leave him to be eaten by rodents. Least he hoped the watery grave would suffice. Now then, where's the exit? He asked himself as he adjusted his clothes and picked up the lantern to begin his search. Took a while to find an exit as he passed by more trash and critters than he cared to admit. Now he was climbing up the ladder and pushed the manhole cover up and to the side, peering out, he saw that he was at the end of a hidden alleyway of sorts. And the buildings all around him were made of stone and brick. The place also was in serious need of color cause everything looked so drab and lifeless. Also the smell was horrible. Not as bad as the sewers he went through just now. Getting out of the hole, he pushed the manhole back in place as he stood up and looked around. He watched from the shadows as he watched horse-drawn carriages and people going about in the grimy city, thinking of his next option. Naruto was unaware of two hooded and robed figures sneaking up on him, one holding a large burlap sack, the other holding a small police club. That boy there will do, just another orphan, one remarked as Naruto heard them, but was too late to react as the bag came down over him as he struggled. But one bonk on the noggin later, and he was out cold with the two figures carrying him away through some old passageways. The next few moments for Naruto upon waking up were filled with pain, suffering, the cult practices and inhumane experimentation. The young child was held down and cut open as these strange crystal shards were inserted into his body. He must have blacked out a few times as he remembered being in this large ritual or something as he was surrounded by chanting and praying robed people. And he was tied down to a slab with chalk markings along it and the floor as candles surrounded the whole thing. He also saw his own body was stripped bare and runic symbols were painted along his skin and blood, most likely his own. Struggling to get free despite his pain, he felt the candles growing hotter and the crystal inside of him began to hum and pulse, causing even more pain as he let out pain screaming. He could feel the shards inside of him start to grow, merge and spread, just as the whole church they were in was starting to shake. What happened next was unknown to the world as Naruto's body lit up in flames and the fire exploded outwards consuming the cultists, the church and everything in a city block radius. Unfortunately, that was just the beginning as monsters began emerging into the human world from where Naruto once was, the blackened stone slab coated in his blood that the terror emerged from. Unknown location. Naruto would find himself waking up in a place that looked oddly similar to that one town he was in before he was used in the ritual, except the sky was a shade of purple. Also he could hear the sounds of a battle going on. Rather than sit around and become a casualty, he decided the next best thing, run and hide away and figure out his situation. Of course, he couldn't really run far as the crystal inside of him kicked up and seemed to hum in this land, as it hurt like a bitch to move as he hid in an alleyway that was poorly lit. He heard the sound of snarling and looked to see a heavily emaciated dog creeping out of the shadows and gazing at him with red eyes and a maw filled with sharp fangs. Salivating like mad as he groaned out despite his pain and feeling the shard inside him shift more and fill him with a sense of heat. Oh no, the demonic canine lunged at him with a snarl as he reacted and brought a hand up in weak defense. Centuries later, within Kuo Academy was a club known as the Occult Research Club, ORC for short, as it was nighttime, and everyone went home or to their dorms. Well, mostly everyone as two young women were in the clubroom, both young beauties, wearing similar school clothing as the redhead was at the nice desk going over plans for the upcoming raiding game. Do you think we have enough to go against? I know we just got new additions, but there is only so much we can do within the time period to train for the game against Riser and his peerage, the Raven-herd one said as Rhea sighed. She knew Akeno was right about this plan, even with her wholeheartedly wanting to help Rhea's get out of this arranged marriage in the first place. The meeting with Riser earlier went peachy with Issei getting riled up at Riser and almost starting a fight on the spot. Thankfully Grafia suggested the raiding game to salvage the chat and get Riser off her back for some time. I know, Akeno, as much as I would love to tear up the marriage contract in front of him, this is the only way we can stop this whole thing, and I won't have to be dolled up for his amusement, she replied and drank the last of her tea before setting the cup aside, leaning back in her chair as she looked over the papers with little doodles of her peerage members and their pros and cons. Akeno stood behind Rhea's and rubbed her shoulders as she smiled softly, using her control over lightning to send small jolts along her master's shoulder muscles to help ease the tension. We will do everything in our power to take out as much as we can, so you can kick him in the balls. We won't let you down, Rhea's, the fallen angel assured as Rhea's looked up to her best friend as Akeno leaned and planted a small kiss on Rhea's lips, which the devil returned before they separated with both smiling. I know you won't, Akeno, I'm just hoping that in case this does go south and we lose, I can at least get you away from his grubby talons, she admitted as she did dislike Riser with a passion for his snobbish man-whoring and privileged ego. She could take the fall if it meant her friends could be safe from him, as she knew he would want to go at Akeno and the others with his comments earlier. She stood up and put the papers away in the drawer as they walked to the door, Akeno opening it to let Rhea's out first, but gave a look when she felt Rhea's hand on her back. On second thought, you go get ready for bed, I'll join you shortly as I want to make sure we're gonna be stocked up for training in the game, the Gremory era said as Akeno nodded and gave a quick hug before leaving for their room. As Rhea's closed the door and locked it with her back against the wood, she let out a sigh and returned to her desk as she sat and reached under the drawer. Feeling a small prick on her finger and hearing a click, she watched a small compartment open under the main drawer and pulled out a small glass vial with a gold and black cap. The only parchment attached to it was a small tag with the symbol of a stylized rose of blue, purple and red. The contents were a strange liquid of red and black that had similar look to ink. She stared at it as the moonlight peered through the windows. With her free hand, she brought out her phone and tapped the screen a few times and reached to the bottom of her contact list where the number was labeled private, but the picture was of the same design as the flower symbol on the vial, tapping to send the call. She put it to her ear and waited for a moment for the other end to pick up. Hey, it's me, just wanted to check up and see how you were doing. I'm sure you've heard the announcement of my upcoming game. She started off with a smile, and her tone was much more relaxed. She even sounded a bit older by the way she spoke on the line. No, I'm fine, I'm just busy trying to plot out how we plan to beat this asshole. I can assure you that I have this in the bag, there is no need to get yourself involved, she said with a level of confidence. Of course, her smile faded as she listened and turned her chair to look outside the window at the moon. You have a funny way of making a woman feel good about themselves, you know that. The last thing I want is to cause a scene and have my brother get angry try to ban you from the underworld over our small secret. I bet that would hamper your job immensely, even if you are quite the elusive one. She held up the vial and let the moon shine on it as she watched the red and black liquid swirl within. I still have your little gift and I promise to only use it if I have no other options. I just need to make sure my peerage is up to par and ready for the fight. Thankfully Akeno and I planned a training regimen to boost ourselves up. No, I don't want you to stop by and help with that. Y'all break them, she couldn't help but giggle and smile. Turning back to her desk as she placed the vial away for later, standing up and stretching as she was tired and ready for sleep. Anyway, I just wanted to hear from you again and see how you were doing. I really like testing my patience, do you? Yes, I missed you, you big oaf. Now stop being mean. She just exhaled in light annoyance, as he did always have a way to make her happy and at the same time annoyed with antics. I'm going to bed and seeing tomorrow where my friends need help with their skills. I hope you have a good night with your assignment. I'll call you after this rating game is dealt with. See you around, big brute, and good night. She pulled the phone away and hung up and set it on the desk before leaving the orc and going to her dorm to sleep. Hopefully Akeno didn't fall asleep on her. Weeks later at the rating game, it was a failure. They did put up a good fight and took out a good chunk of Riser's gang. But the Phoenix won in the end, as he clearly was the better fighter, and his peerage had much more experience than Rhea's team. One by one all her friends were taken down and out, as Issei was the last one to fall. Of course Irizich's tempted him with his desire to build a harem all about busty babes, and winning Rhea's hand as well, while Rhea's had objections. This fell on deaf ears as Issei was in op-high mode, and fought like he was the hero, except Riser took him out after a bit of annoyance, and threw the beaten pawn at Rhea's feet. Sorry President, I couldn't save you, Issei groaned out in defeat as his dreams fell apart in his his mind. Riaz just knelt and patted his head in sympathy. He was a good kid, really perverted, but a good kid. As she was having Asia work on curbing the boy's perviness, she knew he would keep on fighting. But that wasn't needed now. It's fine, Issei. You did your best and that's what matters. She smiled and ruffled his hair before the brunette was taken out of the game by loss. Well, Grafie announced so. Riaz stood up and stared at the smug Riser and those of his girls he still had on the field as he chuckled. So, my dear wife-to-be, ready to submit and join our houses as one? I can't wait for HONEYMOON. He gloated as some of the girls giggled with as Riaz stayed silent. She just stood there alone and glared at her arranged fiancé. What? No scathing words. Surely you must have something to say before we come together as husband and wife and bring forth lovely heirs for our race to prosper. Fate demands it so. He went on as Riaz just kept quiet and let him continue until he got bored of talking about his dreams, her hands coming up to undo her clothes. She began with her blouse and worked down as the audience began questioning what she was doing from their seats. Riser just saw this as her accepting defeat and offering herself, to which he was oh so happy. You are already undressing for me, this is too rich, are you that eager to warm my bed? Riser chuckled as Riaz was soon nude. Thankfully she used a small illusion spell to cover her lower sex as she undid her ponytail and let her luscious hair free as strands covered her nipples, and she had caught the small vial she had stashed within her, done up hair behind her back and brought it to her side. She swallowed and spoke, loud enough so that all the audience, which the entirety of the devil world was watching as this was a high-stakes game of their noble houses. My parents, no matter how much I love them, are idiots. My brother, in all his childish manners and leadership of the devils, is a moron. There are times when I wish I was just a normal girl. No big responsibilities like arranged marriages being set up when you're a child happy to play with toys or going over the deep politics and all that paperwork, but what can you do? Some people are born into roles or molded by their upbringing. I'm no different. I'm a young woman with dreams and wants that were cut short when I learned about my arranged marriage to you and how you presented yourself to the world. Riaz raised her hand and looked down to the vial, her thumb running over the cap and tag as she smiled. But with this, I can change my so-called fate and finally be free of you. She held up the vial for him and everyone to see before she popped the cap off with a thumb flick and downed the contents, coughing at the bitterness as the now empty item turned to ash. As she felt her power morphing within her, she brought her arms together in a self-hug as her wings emerged. The thin devil limbs grew longer and more bat-like as the claws and wing membranes took on a dark red color. Sirizich's and the others rushed in to intervene with this show when Riaz cast her arms out, sending a shockwave and Anachian runes that cast a barrier over the Ranton game field that prevent anyone from getting in. Riaz's friends and family banged and tried using their powers to get through as nothing would work. Riaz then moved her hands before her, manicured nails shifting to demonic claws as sparks of her grimoire powers shot from her fingertips into a sphere of pure destruction. The sphere then shifted and morphed into a lovely dagger. The pommel in the shape of a blooming rose as the handle and hilt were shaped like rose stem and thorns. The blade itself looked to be made of brilliant crimson gem with a black inner core, the blade floating and twirling in the air before her. Riaz, open this barrier right now. That's an order. Sirizich's yelled out to his sister, some anger in his tone but mostly worry as he could sense the demonic power within her had changed into something different and it scared him as he didn't want to his dear little sister become something horrendous. Of course Riaz heard all the shouts and pleas of worry from her loved ones but she just droned them out, partially cause the power within her was telling her to crush Riser and also that she was taking a stand, not as the little sister to the ruler of hell, but as Riaz Grimoire, herself. The dagger finally aimed itself at her and plunged into her chest, right into her heart as she released a grunt and fell back first to the ground. The barrier collapsing as everyone rushed in to grab her. Just as Riaz's back touched the floor, a shockwave of demonic power exploded from her and sent everyone flying back, and the world was blinded by a flash of light. Back in the shinobi world, for those wondering, the nations were celebrating, happy that history's shortest war was over before it lasted long and friends and family we happy to be home with loved ones and reunite with those that were brought back. There will be a time when the nations come together in a joint alliance, but for now, people were partying, celebrating and all sorts of fun and joy, well mostly everyone. But in the Hyuga residence, one Hinata Hyuga was bawling her eyes out into her pillow, heartbroken that the man she longed for was no longer there for her. Her mother, Hinoka Hyuga, stroked her daughter's hair and tried to soothe her eldest child from her woes as she was one of the resurrected and happy to see her family again. Outside the room door, Haishi, Bizashi and Hanabi watched with pity as they couldn't do much for Hinata. At the bar in the entertainment district, people were having fun and drinking and cheering at the end of the fourth war and so on and so forth. In one corner in the back was Kiba, Niji, Shikamaru, Chaoji and Sai. Each was somber compared to the others in the place as they all poured a glass and held a toast for their fallen comrade, who quite literally united all the shinobi together and ended the war with being the only casualty. Glasses bumped together in toast as Kiba spoke. "To the boss," the group nodding in agreement as they all took their drinks. In the forests around the Gremory territory, it was raining as a young Riaz ran through the woods, tears streaming down her face as she stumbled and came to a stop, hurriedly crawling into a hollowed-out tree. As she could hear the calls of the family's many servants for her as they were searching for her, she curled up and hugged her legs, as her white clothes were stained in dirt and messy. She did her best to hide her presence and cast a small illusion to make herself invisible, as she rubbed her eyes and wept, crying her heart out as she was alone and just let her sadness flow. Did her parents not love her anymore? She made sure to be a good girl and not upset them. How did she fail them? The news of her arranged wedding with one Riser Phoenix was given to her by her parents when they came to her room after her reading time. Obviously, the news wasn't taken well as she left the manor at night when everyone was busy. "I'm a good girl, I swear," she mumbled to herself, sniffling as she wiped her tears with her sleeve and heard the clan servant still out there, along with her new friend Akeno. The voices got closer as she didn't want to go back, not when her parents wanted to give her away to some spoiled brat. She heard bad stories about mean masters and their servants from the small talk of the Gremory maids, along with something about this new game that her big brother was working on. The rain was in a constant downpour before it stopped. In fact, she couldn't hear the calls of family either, opening her eyes and blinking a bit to rid herself of any more tears. She noticed raindrops suspended in the air before her. She turned and looked through a hole in the tree she was hiding in and could make out the shapes of butlers and maids, even Akeno too, as they were all frozen in place, as if time had simply stopped for everything but her. Riaz gasped as she heard footsteps and turned to face the noise. She was met by the arrival of a young man in black clothing with gold trim. The black cloak he had on for the weather had a red inside and a pretty design. She saw that he was a young man close in age to Sirizich's by look alone, and his pale blonde hair was wet from the rain. Most interesting thing was the faded whisker marks on his face, as his bluish-purple eyes stared at her with a look of sympathy and understanding. She noticed another interesting detail was that he had this strange stained glass design along his exposed skin. From what she could see, he moved his arm and held out a black gloved hand to her gently. "Come with me." The current rating game. The flare of light that encompassed the rating game and the audience and the many camera recording faded away as the devils were coming to their senses and picking themselves up. Sirzich's was pulled out of his broken throne by his friends as they all got to see Riaz, the new Riaz. "By the old Satan's," Benalana uttered out as she saw what her beloved daughter had become. Everyone saw where Riaz had fallen after her dagger plunged into her heart, rather than seeing the corpse of the young woman like they thought. Riaz was kneeling. Her now larger devil wings were covering her, as the end claws had small golden ring piercings on them. What was also noticeable was the black bone-like protrusions that were sprouting from between her shoulders and wings sprouting from her shoulder blades. Said bone growth was arching up and looming behind Ria's head, forming a glossy mirror of sorts on its surface, with the image of a lacquer black moon going from phase to phase. Riaz inhaled deeply and stood up as she examined herself. The young woman looked to have grown a few inches, and her skin tone was a few shades paler than her fair complexion. She was totally nude in her new form, her chest being barely covered from full reveal by some of her long crimson locks. Her arms were pale at the shoulders, but dipped into a shade of scarlet down to her fingertips, and black nails sharp like claws grew from her fingers. Her luscious hair looked to grow down to her thighs now as her eyes were graced with crimson eyeliner and shadow, as her teal eyes glowed in contrast to her now black sclera with wonder while looking at herself. A pair of golden horns in the shape of a crescent moon jutted through her hair. The biggest change was that her body from the hips down was that of a beast. A camel, to be more precise, as the head of said animal had grown out from her pelvis. Her legs were that of a camel, and her feet were hooves. She was indeed nude on her lower body, but the beast's lower half hid her sex, as her fine ass was still prominent despite the beastly appearance. She even had grown a tail just like a camel coming from her tailbone, as it wiggled a bit. Finally, she had a sort of belt that lay just over her body where woman and animal met, in the shape of a gold duchess crown, and inlaid with numerous gems of sapphire, emerald and ruby. A few gold chains circled along her waist just connected to the crown, as there was a thicker chain that went through the eye sockets of the camel head growth and connected to the crown. "Oh my, this feels so surreal," Riaz complimented in a tone of joy, and with her voice sounding echoing as she ran her hands along her body, taking note of all the changes, and even laughing at the fact she had a cute tail, grabbing the ribbon for her ponytail earlier, and making a cute little bow that she placed on her tail for some cute points. Now that she was done looking herself over and giving Issei a boner when she groped herself during her examination, the she-devil turned her gaze to Riser, who looked at her in shock. Just like everyone else, Riaz just smirked as her canines had lengthened with her transformation as she spoke up. "Something wrong there, Riser? You look uncertain about wanting me. Am I not pretty enough for you?" she asked in a mocking tone as the change to the Gremory princess was more than a physical one it seemed. Riser blinked and regained his signature demeanor as he chuckled, turning to laughter as he spoke in his standard haughty tone. "This new look is quite something, my dear fiancé. I will admit you got me by surprise. With a cheap parlor try his sentence was cut off midway as Riaz raised her left hand and index finger pointed to him. A small bead of her family's pod formed in a small glow before it shot out as a thin beam that punctured the Phoenix heir's throat and out the back, all before he could react. He collapsed to his knees and hacked up blood as she just made a hole in his vocal cords to shut him up as his gloating was annoying. His peerage coming to his defense as Riaz stepped back and avoided a hit from Shulin, easily avoiding the martial artist's attacks as she retaliated with superior speed and force. A chop to her neck and a punch to the gut had the Chun-Li look-alike double over in pain, and she went for a mule kick to get Riaz, only to be shocked with Riaz caught her by the ankle through the fire and turned, pulling the rook up and over her head before slamming her down into the ground like a ragdoll and making a small crater with her other hand. She made a grasping gesture as her hand glowed in power. The ground under Shulin bled in black red ooze and clawed demon hand sprouted out and grabbed the rook, the girl struggling and screaming in fear as more hands emerged and grabbed her before she was pulled under and the ooze dissipated away. Riaz's rook has been eliminated, Grafia announced as she was back in her spectator mode, despite an awe of Riaz and her recent action. Shulin. Yubaluna called out to the servant as Riaz turned to them and held a smirk as her hands glowed with green and magenta miasma. Without warning, her hand shot forward and small energy spheres in the shape of the full moons were cast from her magic as they impacted and exploded against the peerage, throwing Rizer and Yubaluna back and covering them in demon runes that bound them to the floor as Nai and Li lunged in at Riaz, snarling at the woman. Riaz just stopped her magic and clapped her hands together, and her wings came forth to hook the thumb talons on her wrists. What happened next surprised everyone more as magic flared along her limbs and wings before she separated them and revealed that her arms and wings had merged together and split apart, having a total of 8 demonic arms sprouting from her shoulders as each hand flexed and moved with the wings, shifting to become sleeves along said arms. The twin felines were caught off guard as they moved to attack and dodge the multi-limbed Grimmery princess. Didn't last long as the two were overwhelmed by the barrage of blows as each was grabbed by the throat and the remaining 6 arms punched them with a relentless fury. The 2 Nikos dropped from her hold as they were down for the count. Rizer's 2 pawns have been eliminated. Grafia's announcement was heard as the defeated pawns vanished from the field. Ria's arms merged back to her regular arms and wings as she heard a shout and moved to avoid a knife from going across her face. Carloman has sword in one hand and dagger in other as she was on the offensive and giving it her all against Riaz. The redhead had an easy time avoid contact with the weapons as she was seeing the knight moving slower than normal thanks to her enhanced senses, thanks to her power boost. The icon of the moon within her bone ring behind her head spun and changed to that of a crescent moon and shined briefly. Carloman was too slow to respond as a crescent moon blade shot forth and sliced through her wrist, taking her hand and knife away as a bloody stump was left, the woman screaming in pain as Riaz just put her out with a backhand that broke the knight's neck and took her out of the fight. Rizer's knight has been eliminated. Riaz was hit by a fireball from behind and looked to see it was Ravel who cast it. She aimed and fired off another fireball as Riaz just sighed before closing her eyes as her moon icon glowed and she was sucked into it, teleporting in such a manner that looked like being sucked in a black hole as she reappeared behind Ravel and took out the girl with a blow to the back of her head before she could react to her warp. Rizer's bishop has been eliminated, and then there were 2 with the rest of Rizer's peerage being taken out in a matter of moments. Riaz smiled as she looked to Rizer and Yubaluna snapping her fingers as the binding runes vanished and the 2 picked themselves up. Riaz just placed one hand on her hip and the other fixed her bangs a bit as she spoke. "So, still wanting my hand in marriage?" she asked rhetorically as she could smell Rizer's fear, and he stank of it. Riaz was hit with one of Yubaluna's bomb spells as the purple-haired devil was throwing many at the other in quick succession, moving to stand before Rizer and defend him from Riaz. "Ah, you witch." The bomb queen screamed out in fury at being denied the win of this battle, as she had hoped to bask in victory over the Grimmery princess. The plume of smoke was moving closer to Yubaluna, despite her barrage, and a fist shot out and struck her square in the face. Yubaluna stumbled back as her spell stopped, and a hand went up to her face as she felt blood and her nose was broken. The smoke being blown away by a flap of Ria's wings as she moved her hand and stabbed her nails into Rizer's queen under her ribsage as she lifted the woman up, who groaned in agony as she was lifted off the floor. Rizer growled and tried to act, but Ria's other hand moved and hit him with another moon blast as he was thrown back and crashed into the building on the field, making it crumble on top of him. Riaz looked up to Yubaluna as she felt her blood seeping down her hand. Without a word she dropped her and let the woman clutch her wound and look at Riaz with venom in her eyes, reaching in her dress for something but not finding it. Riaz just held up her bloody hand and showed off the small red and gold vial full of pink shimmering liquid in her fingers that had Yubaluna in surprise. "Looking for this?" She smirked as Ubeluna was unable to heal herself. Riaz just made a sleight of hand trick as the vial vanished from her hand and she aimed it, palm outwards to the downed woman as her pod blazed to life. For a moment, Ubeluna thought she saw pity in Ria's eyes as she looked down on her. Before her world was engulfed in power and the bomb queen felt her every fiber being atomized by the famed power of destruction in a single blast. What was left was a small tear through the ground and not a single shred of the queen of Riser's peerage was left. Riser's queen has been eliminated. Ubeluna. Riser had dug his way out of the rubble just in time to watch his favorite servant being obliterated by Riaz. As she lowered her hand, she looked to him as the full moon cast its light over the playing field as both kings stared at each other. It's not late to surrender, Riser. Salvage whatever pride you have at being bested by little me, she offered, Riser being his stubborn self. Looked and reached out to cast his fire, only to have Ria's hand clamp down on the wrist and standing in front of him with a frown, surprising him with her speed. She yanked his hand out and squeezed as he gave a gasp of pain as his hand fell limp with the bones of his wrist being crushed, her other hand shooting and grabbing his neck in a steel grip as he began to choke. Riser was clawing at her grip around his neck as he cold breathed as she floated up with her wings spread and held him in the air. Seems I have to pluck your feathers to make you quit, she hummed before punching him in the face, dazing him as his nose crunched, followed by another punch that broke a few teeth, then some backhands that had his ears ringing. She let him go as he gulped down air, only to cough it back up as her fist smashed into his diaphragm and he was sent flying and crashing into the ground. Coughing and wheezing as Riaz floated down and her majestic wings closed behind her, she just stalked closer as Riser managed to get up despite his pain, but was struck back down with a blast of magic to the face that burned his skin away. He was hit with another blast, then another, each one shredding away his clothes and flesh as his phoenix healing was working to heal him up. She just kept blasting him point blank with her pod as she could hear his screams of pain as his body was in a cycle of wounding and healing. Eventually she ceased her assault on the poor man as she knelt and saw his smoking body, his skin blackened, charred and healing slowly as she could see his muscles and bones. He was barely clothed as those were ruined and he was unable to speak while his throat healed from the bloody mess it had been reduced to from her. She reached and grasped him by his hair as the skin of his face was healing and looked him dead in the eyes as she pulled him up to level. Her other hand going to over his groin area as the black and red flames of her magic formed in palm and aimed for his crotch. Say it, surrender now or I will test how much phoenix regeneration can handle the constant pressure of my power of destruction, she stated in a tone that was more of a promise than a threat as Riser was out of luck, beaten down and at the mercy of the woman he lusted after and got demolished by. I surrender. He got out, straining his freshly regenerated throat as Riaz dismissed her power and pulled her hand away, only to bring it down and punch him in the balls that had his testicles pop from the impact as he screamed in pain. That was for harassing my peerage in front of me, she spoke as she let go of his hair as the guy cradled his recovering balls and the rating game was called. Victory of the Gremory vs Renex rating game goes to Riaz Gremory, the Ice Queen announced as the field faded entirely and returned to the stadium stage and grounds as Riaz stood up and dusted her hands. She turned to walk off the stage as medics moved in to gather Riser and take him to recover as they passed her. She saw her peerage staring at her with reactions of awe and wonder and smiled to them as she spotted Gasper with them and eating from his jar of snacks that he was gifted by a friend of hers. The sound of clapping was heard as Akeno had started to do so as she stood up, a happy smile on her face as she moved onto the stage and hugged Riaz as she returned it. That set off a spark as the audience went along and clapped, some cheering at the wild show they were given, Riaz and Akeno separating as the fallen angel took the moment to examine her best friend's new look and the unique change as she honestly found her more lovely than ever. I must know how all this came about, Riaz, your new look, the powers you displayed, everything, she said in a bit of a heated tone as Riaz smiled and knew Akeno always looked out for her. She reached and pinched Akeno's cheek and replied, in good time, Akeno, come, with the game over we should all return to that annoying party that was set up beforehand. She was ready to get off the stage with Akeno as Riser spoke up now as he was on the gurney ready to be carried away. How? He looked at Riaz with a frown, she raised an eyebrow as he moved to sit up despite the medics asking him to not move. How have you become this powerful? You were never capable of this strength before, where did this sudden growth come from? He demanded as he got off the gurney and stood up, pushing the people away, trying to get him back on and take him away to recover. Serziches also added his 2 cents as he stood up from his spot in the judge's spot. Yes Riaz, Riser has a point, where did this all come from and how did you attain such change and power? He asked, though it was more of a silent command to divulge what she knew, as he did keep tabs on his sister, if only to make sure she wasn't in danger while away from the family. Oh, now you suddenly care about my well-being after I beat Riser and rid myself of the stupid arrangement. she questioned with a hot tone as she was still sore about the subject and was just happy to be rid of the whole thing, even if it upset the Phoenix family. Serziches just frowned and put his hands down on the desk before him as he looked down to Riaz and replied in full leadership mode. Damn it, Riaz, this is not the time for games, I want answers now. Who or what did you meet to break the marriage contract? You know our laws and traditions and why the marriage was so necessary, you have to stop being so selfish and inconsiderate. He said as while he did love his sister, he had to put the people first here and in the public. Riaz just placed her hands on her hips and shot back with a frown of her own. So that's what this is all about, still trying to go through with the bullshit. I thought you would be happy that dear sister was not forced to marry someone she doesn't love, but I guess you're just like mother and father when they made the arrangement, you only cared about me as a means to an end, and were more than happy to sell me off if it meant looking good for the people. She snarled out as she quickly calmed herself and turned to Akeno. Akeno, could you please return to your seat? She asked as Akeno was feeling the family drama as was everyone else and nodded to Riaz as she left her. Riaz looked to Serziches who held a look of shame at her words, as in a sense she was right, scanning over her parents who held neutral looks then to Rizer, who was still upset and mostly healed up now. Riaz's wings moved to hug her body and morphed into a cloak of sorts around her frame, as the shoulders had black and red spikes jutting out and tin bat wings that went down to her shins, as each wing was tipped with a golden hoop ring. Since it was asked about so nicely, I suppose I should share some details about my secret meetings with a good friend of mine. You see, this whole thing started out the night I was given the news of the arranged marriage to you. I did not take it well, and when everyone was looking the other way I ran, tried to get as far away from home as I could. I couldn't fathom the thought of such a deal being made, especially when I was so young. I had asked myself in my sorrow and heartbreak, did my family not love me anymore? Why did they want to sell me off to some sick bastard in the making? Riaz was interrupted from her storytelling as Benelana and Zioticus shared a look. Hey, that is not true. The Phoenix yelled out as Riaz just scoffed. Rizer, you're about as appealing as a decaying bag of dog shit. You treat your peerage as nothing but toys for your own pleasure to boot. You needed to be humbled before you get out of control. She shut him up with that, as the Phoenix lord and lady sighed in embarrassment as their son was becoming known for his reputation. In my moment of weakness, I was visited upon by him. That night, a presence found its way to me, so dark, so beautiful. It was with him that I learned of a way to put an end to the merging of our families, and I am so very thankful to have someone as wonderful as him in my life. Riaz smiled warmly as she had her dear friend in her thoughts and how he made it all possible. Who is this person that tampered with your devil lineage and turned you into this? Rizer asked as Riaz just burst out into laughter. She took a moment to get that out of her system and compassed herself and smirked. Oh please, you think this was forced upon me? I wanted this, Rizer. I was given the golden opportunity to put a stop to our wedding, and I gladly took it, she voiced out, but this wedding is important. He would start before she snarled at him that sounded like an angry lioness as he flinched. Important to who? Our parents, you, the old traditions to keep the pure-blooded devils from dying out. I will not sit idly by and let our families decide my love life, especially not with you. Riaz growled out as magic emanated from her hands, calming herself as she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and let her magic relax. As she moved a hand to her camel head as it opened its mouth, a single rose was produced into her hand. As she held it up for everyone to see, apologies, I got antsy. Now, you ask to meet the lovely person who helped me into becoming what you all see before you. I will call him here for you. Riaz pricked her finger along one of the thorns and let several droplets fall on the rose petals that were a mix of blue, red and purple, as she then tossed the rose and it landed on the tile floor, lighting up in vermilion flames as a small smoke trail flowed up in the air above the stadium. The magic sigil formed itself into existence and glowed with hellish energy. This of course grabbed everyone's attention as they looked up to the glowing sigil as it shined, and soon enough flashed as something emerged from it. The object fell and landed on the stage with a crash that threw up dust temporarily covering it, which was blown away by Riaz with her wings, as now the object summoned was in fact a person on a bench. Perfect, now that you are, Riaz started, but the sound of loud snoring was filling the air as she realized he was in fact sleeping on said bench he was sprawled out on, head at an angle, hence the snoring. The young man was wearing blue jeans, boots, had a reddish-brown leather jacket, and opened with an orange shirt underneath, and topped with a small necklace with a lovely fox charm. Black gloves on his hands as his facial features were the most defining. He looked to be around the age of Serziches in appearance, even with a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow he was sporting. His hair was a bit longer, down to his chest from the spiky blonde hairstyle he was known for, as well as losing the bright blonde luster of his human youth too, now a pale blonde and somewhat wavy. His signature whisker markings were still there and faded too. All in all, he looked like a handsome young man who has been around the world and quite illegible. Riaz just pouted with a cute frown at seeing her friend wasn't even aware she brought him here, even nudging him a few times to try and wake him up didn't work. She just raised a hand, curled it into a fist and brought it down on his chest with a shout that sounded more like a childish whine. Wake up, Naruto. He was promptly sent into the ground by the power behind her hit as the impact threw up some dirt and revealed that he was now at the bottom of a deep hole thanks to her. Morning to you too, Riaz. Can I ask why you thought it necessary to wake me up like that? His voice echoed out from the hole as Riaz just folded her arms and responded with a huff. You were sleeping on a park bench and didn't even register me calling you in and trying to nudge you awake, she explained as a deep sigh could be heard from him. Oh, my bad, darling. Suddenly a golden chain shot up from the hole and grabbed hold of the edge as he pulled himself out of it and dusted himself off as he got up and the chain dispersed in energy sparks from his hand, now revealing to be quite the tall one. He looked to Riaz as he gazed from hoof to moon icon as Riaz did a little twirl and gave a warm smile to Naruto. So, how do I look? She asked with a friendly tone as it was clear there was something between the two that no one had known about. Naruto just smiled warmly to Riaz. He raised a hand and ruffled her crimson hair. Like a true duke of the underworld, he said softly in approval as Riaz hugged him and didn't care about the show of affection displayed in front of everyone. Naruto just hugged her back as he felt her emotions of joy. Riaz separating as Naruto caught the scent and sound of crackling fire and saw her eyes had a fireball the size of a boulder ready and pissed. So, you're the asshole who destroyed my marriage to my beautiful Riaz. For that transgression, you will die. He shouted and threw the fireball at Naruto, who gently pushed Riaz away before the fireball hit its target. Rizer let out a laugh at the easy win, as some of the audience booed at the attack against the new arrival. Now that was rude, didn't even greet you, and you threw this at me. His voice could be heard as the massive fireball had been halted in the air around Naruto as it began to shrink and get sucked into a single spot. Naruto was revealed to everyone as he had his hand outstretched as the phoenix flames were being gathered into a spot in front of said hand, and soon he closed the limb around the white hot ball of heat, the light peering through his fingers as it shifted red, and soon, he opened his hand to reveal a ruby the size of an egg in his gloved hand, its inner core glowing with fire. Naruto just smiled as he put the ruby away in his jacket and dusted his hands off while looking to Rizer. Thanks, was needing one of those, he cheekily remarked as Rizer just growled as he looked to Naruto, coming up with some idea why the blonde before him had the gall to interfere on his marriage to Ria's Gremory and tainted her beauty. I know. You're just jealous of nobility like me, you measly mongrel. With a snap, he summoned Yubaluna back to his side as he fondled and molested the moaning devil in front of Naruto and the audience, like before making a say annoyed at the guy. The phoenix air kissing and showing off his queen and possessiveness to Naruto and Riaz as he smirked like the kid with all the cool new toys. Look at what you can never have, hobo. Rizer gloated and insulted Naruto's appearance as he and Yubaluna kissed like a pair of horny teens, trying to make an amateur porno. Naruto just looked to Riaz as she was pinching the bridge of her nose at the display. Thought you said you had this covered. Oh no I did, but due to popular demand of my new look, I had used that rose of yours, apologies. Ah it's fine, I was on my lunch break in Germany anyway, he shrugged with a wink as Riaz smiled back to him as Naruto looked back to Rizer, who had finished his tonsil hockey with Yubaluna. That's supposed to make me envious or something, kid. Don't get me wrong, your companion is a looker, but I'm not really seeing anything to be upset with. All I see is a spoiled brat not getting his way and throwing a fit in response. Naruto shrugged as he folded his arms over his chest. Rizer was not gonna take that insult standing as he growled and threw Yubaluna aside and prepared to fire off another fireball, only to have his hand caught in Naruto's grasp and being squeezed. Yubaluna fell back into a comfy chair that Naruto summoned as she didn't fall on her ass. The bigger blonde just held his hold as Rizer found himself falling to his knees and his hand being crushed in Naruto's hold as he saw ice frosting up from the hold, making his limb brittle and letting him feel each and every crack and break from the pressure. With his other hand, Naruto grabbed Rizer by his chin and forced him to look him face to face. Honest tip, don't pick fights you can't win, Naruto said as he crushed the frozen limb, making Rizer scream out as now that hand did a few motions with teal aura coming from the fingers as he looked into Rizer's eyes, while his own glowed a hellish red. The phoenix found himself falling unconscious as Naruto had cast an illusion on him and then picked him up and placed him on the stretcher for those devils to take him away as Rizer was muttering no, no, no in his sleep while his hand reformed and he was taken away by healers. Naruto glanced down to the small yellow crystal shard in hand as he put that away in his pocket and turned to the audience. Sorry about that folks, how about we return to whatever we were doing, the game's over, right? He looked to the judge's seat as Surziches remembered that detail and called for everyone to return to the party. Naruto just held his smile as he congratulated Riaz on her win. Congrats, Riaz, you're a free woman able to enjoy yourself without being hitched. He chuckled as he patted Ria's head and her response was to smile and accept the head pats. She then asked, hey Naruto, is there a way to return to my regular form? she asked as Naruto just brought out a small black stone of sorts as he tapped it on her chest, right over her heart as her form was engulfed by black smoke that dissipated to reveal Ria's was back to her normal appearance as the stone had been absorbed into her, save for her longer hair. Enhanced devil wings and the cute blooming rose tattoo over her heart now. Ria smiled with a thanks again as he cleared his throat and she remembered she was nude and her wings hugged her form to cover up. Naruto snapped fingers as a 360 shower curtain appeared around the young woman and she got her clothes back on before the covers vanished and she was back in her school uniform. The redhead thanking him again as she turned to join her friends, not aware Naruto summoned a small towel and whipped it up. Whack you. Ria screamed out that sounded more like a masked moan as her hands instantly clamped over her mouth with wide eyes and she turned to Naruto with a surprised look that basically asked, what the hell was that for? As she just got towel whipped in her ass with Naruto holding his cheeky grin as the towel vanished. That was for the love tap to wake me up, was his reply as she just rolled her eyes and lowered her hands. Ria's, the sound of Surzich's voice made Ria's look and see her brother, Grafia and her parents walk over to her and Naruto as she could spot the Phoenix family and Riser's peerage following. After those who took Riser to recover, she looked back to her family as her peerage watched from the edge of the stage. We need to have a word with you, privately. Flashback. Little Ria's had calmed down from her sobbing earlier as she was sitting on the shoulder of the young man, who introduced himself as Naruto Uzumaki when asked, her hands holding on his head as she felt safe around him, having cast a small spell of comfort as he helped the young girl from her hiding spot and was taking her back to her home, which Ria surprisingly was content with considering her earlier mood and act running away. Where are you from, mister? I never heard of an Uzumaki clan, she asked as being in his presence just made her feel better and washed away her fear. Them not from around, little cherry, new in town, he replied as he carried the princess back home. But Riaz tugged his hair gently as he looked to where she pointed. We can't forget my friend Akeno. She pouted as he nodded and went over to the frozen girl, waving his hand before her face and muttering sleep as he caught the now asleep child and earning a thank you from Riaz as he took them back, Riaz on his shoulders and Akeno in his arms. Now, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what is a little one like yourself doing out in the rain? Y'all catch a cold? He asked politely as he glanced up to her as Riaz had the decency to frown cutely at his words, had a point about getting sick, especially since she was just in her dirty pajamas. My parents don't like me anymore, she got out as she sniffled, her happy mood instantly brought down by the reality of her life. Nonsense, children are a blessing to their parents, no child should be hated by their family, he rebutted as he sensed her negative emotions. Riaz didn't comment as she doubted, he was even aware of her problem, but she continued, instead of telling him off like any noble would about private affairs. Mom and dad said that there was a big fight earlier and hurt a lot of people, so, the remaining families want to try and fix things up, and now they want to get rid of me. She sniffed and wiped her budding tears, as Naruto just frowned at her words, so this was in regards to the civil war that ended sometime after he arrived to this lovely place. The remaining pillars wanted to try and preserve their pureblood lineage in the wake of this system that was in the works by the top leaders, and their plans to replenish their losses, something to do with the game chess. Well, that was what he got off his intel and snooping around in places he shouldered. Right, so the clans are wanting to try and keep their influence and arrange marriages that would benefit them, and your family is also going with emotions here to not look bad. But I don't want to be some creep's toy, I want to pick who I want to love. She whined out. They had arrived at the mansion as he whistled at the sheer size of the place, and here he thought the Hyugas and Daimos back home were full of themselves with their castles and compounds that took up chunks of villages. Riaz guided him around the house from the outside and pointed to the window of her room as Naruto floated off the ground and into her bedroom after opening the window. He placed Akeno in her bed and used a heat spell to dry her wet clothes before tucking her in and moved over to Ria's bed and plucked her off of him, setting her down on the furniture. I hear that, little cherry, earning a pout from the cute nickname he bestowed upon her. No one wants to be stuck with some jerk who doesn't like them for who they are, but with the recent big event everyone is coming back from, sometimes those in charge must make tough choices. When it comes to their people they watch over and protect, even if it means upsetting a few people in the process, he said as he gently knelt down by the bed, so he was level with Riaz and gave a smile to her. Sometimes, in order to prevent war and stop stuff like arranged weddings and one-sided treaties, you have to gain influence and power if you want to change the world for the better and help those stuck in situations like yours. You see, war and peace have a cycle. People meet, agreements are made, some bad seeds break the rules, tensions rise, peace talks fail, and war breaks out. Rinse and repeat every while or so as not everyone are good with the terms and take matters in their hands. It's an unfortunate part of any civilization's history regarding allies, enemies and neighbors, and quite hard to just make people get along and come together, I should know. He explained in simple terms and used a piece of paper and his magic to animate a small stick figure drawing to go along with his words as she watched with curiosity. Were you in a war, mister? she asked as his tone about the Civil War seemed like he knew how things would play out after such an event. Her question just had his warm smile shift to a defeated smile as he couldn't help but look to the floor, his mood shifting a bit. I lost quite a few friends, he uttered out, sounding like he held himself accountable for their deaths as she felt bad for him and reached out to pat his head. This of course had his mood change as he faced her again, any semblance of sadness gone from his eyes. But that's enough about dear old me, you actually summoned me earlier and as per the rules, I'm here to strike a deal with you. He smiled once more as Riaz remembered something about devils making deals with others when summoned. Wait, are you a devil? She asked in surprise. He didn't seem like one, and his energy was hard to place really. Nope, I'm just your local magic genie. His response just had a question mark appear above her head before it turned into an exclamation point as she got it, a bright smile on her young face as this was her chance. I wish to have the power to break my marriage. She wished with a finger raised looking cute in her moment of triumph. A couple moments passed as nothing happened and she looked around. Did it not work? I don't feel any different, she asked as Naruto couldn't help but snicker, which got a pout and mean glare from the princess. You lie. She whined as he barked out a laugh. I can't grant you something you already have, Lil Cherry. At her confused look, he just explained and poked her right over her heart. You see, you already have the power to better yourself and choose your own life and love, but as of right now, you're still too young to even get a grasp of your powers. Not to worry, as with training and growth, you will be able to. In fact, I can help you unlock your true potential. I can be your secret teacher if you wish to unlock your true power and dreams. Would you like that? He offered and she nodded and asked after realizing. But mister, how will that work? Mommy and daddy keep a close eye on people coming and going, and big bro is suspicious to strangers he doesn't know. Naruto just nodded at that as he picked up the paper he used and asked, want to see a magic trick? He then held the paper in hand as he waved the other hand over it in a circle, the paper glowing as his energy seeped into the item, and the paper shifted, changing shape and becoming a rose, its petals a beautiful mixture of blue, purple and red. Riaz was taken back by the pretty rose as he offered it to her, and she took it, handling it gently like it was made of thin glass. Call me for your secret training. Just hold that close and focus on my name. Just make sure you're alone and no one is following you, okay? Not everyone is aware of me, and I'd like to keep it that way for a while, at least until I'm settled in, okay? He instructed as she shook her head yes, getting up to leave as he ruffled her hair with a smile. He went over the Akeno and reached into his cloak, bringing out a small handmade felt doll that was dressed as a Maiko with hair like Akeno's, but the button eyes were a light brown to her purple. He gently placed the doll in her arms as she hugged it to herself, then using some heat and cleaning spells, he made sure Riaz was mess-free and any evidence of his presence was zero, returning to the window and ready to leave. You promise? He stopped at that as he turned back to face her and gave a bow, not some mock bow or an extravagant one, but a simple one that conveyed respect, straightening up as he gave one of his warm smiles at seeing her questioning and sad look, like she thought he was gonna bail on her. Promise of a lifetime. Good night, Riaz Gremory. He waved as he hopped out of the open window as it closed and locked, while Riaz snuggled into her bed, hiding the rose under her pillow, as she held a smile and went to sleep. Naruto was at the edge of Gremory territory when he raised a hand and snapped his fingers, time resuming, as his form burst into demon bats and scattered into the night sky. Present. We find everyone back at the Gremory mansion where that party was set up for the wedding between Riaz and Riser, except that union was over by the lovely lady, and now there was a light air of confusion. Course that confusion was divided between two things, the whispers of the pureblood still fading out as always with the current climate. The other factor was currently sitting on a couch near the long table of food and drink for the guests, enjoying a can of soda, compared to the variety of expensive and tasteful alcohols offered by the Gremory's wine cellars. He was just by himself as Riaz was off in Zeotica's study having their family talk, so he just kept silent and unassuming, as big noble parties like these were not his style. He was busy thinking what to make for dinner tonight as Riaz Peerage, along with her other friends like Sona and Sakvara, made a beeline towards him after dressing all nice for the party. Everyone else was keeping their distance as he reeked of commoner. Good evening, sir. Akeno started off as Naruto looked the group over, smiling as he replied. Hey, you guys must be Ria's little group of friends. At their nods he chuckled. She didn't tell me you were all so cute, he complimented before getting up to help himself to the assortment of foods with them following him. Boss man, it's good to see you. Gasper announced with a smile as Naruto got a high five from the damper. Hey Gasper, how's it going? Still practicing with your powers in your room and those books I gave you? He asked as Gasper nodded happily. Yep, I want to spar with you sometime to show my improvements, Candy. He offered one of those tardigrade-looking critters, Cryptobites from Death Stranding, cute little bugs, from the glass jar he was carrying around to Naruto, who accepted it and popped it into his mouth to eat. B+. He asked as Gasper nodded. He ruffled Gasper's hair like a big brother would before returning to select his food, as the little talk between him and Gasper confused the group of teens he knew and was friendly with Gasper. You're friends with Gasper, sir? It's Naruto, sir makes me feel old, he admitted as Akeno corrected herself. Yeah, Rias told me when she took him in during one of her lessons with me. I heard about his issues and approached his father and had a chat. Soon after I took to helping Gasper harness and control his abilities and better his personality. It's a work in progress, he said as Gasper blushed at the last part, still shy and meek around others that were not Naruto. He had selected his food. Bunch of meats, greens, grains and some sweet dessert to go with what he was hungry and that little Cryptopia had only fed him a sliver. So wait, who are you exactly and what do you do for a living? I've never heard of you and from the sound of it, you and Rias have some sort of secret friendship together and it's been kept from everyone until now. Sona asked as she prided herself on knowledge and going by the rules. Naruto just munched on a kebab before swallowing and answering the question as he shrugged nonchalantly. Name's Naruto Uzumaki and I'm just a simple man making his way in the universe. As for me and Rias, she's the student and I helped her bloom into a beautiful rose worthy of her family name and choose her life as she desires. His answer was satisfactory for some as they accepted it, others though. Hold it, then what was the vial she drank before becoming that thing Issei demanded as the resident pervert was still new to all this stuff as Naruto just focused on the new vessel of Drag, catching a whiff of the dragon within Issei as he made a note about that in his mind. Rias is still Rias, that form of hers was just her true power of the Gremory bloodline emerging, the Bale bloodline, and powers takes priority over lesser devil blood due to its status as the king of kings and topmost clan amongst the 72 pillars. As for the little vial, that was her power. I just used my dark arts and some of her blood to make a small enhancing agent and poof. Rias is now capable of utilizing both sides of her family's powers, as well as embracing her demon heritage to the fullest, he explained, as if talking about the weather as this just confused them. Here this guy was who quite literally changed Ria's power, and being to harness both Bale and Gremory, rather than just the power of destruction. But, her beautiful boobs, Issei muttered with tears down his face as Naruto just rolled his eyes at the pervert. Kid was sound like the long-lost son of Jiraiya, bless his old hermit soul. Naruto snapped his fingers as a control spell overtook Issei, and they watched the young man straighten up, walk himself over to the couch, sit down and with one hand bitch slap himself into sleep as he collapsed, drawing a giggle from Akeno as Naruto resumed his meal before someone approached him from behind. Excuse me sir, Naruto turned as he saw Grafia, the head mate of the clan and Surzich's queen standing before him. Lord and Lady Gremory would like to speak with you and your involvement with Lady Rias. He smiled with a nod and set his plate of food down as the silver maid guided him away, and the group of friends now were left with trying to figure him out. Akeno noted that he was handsome and held a unique power as getting a red on him just filled her head with even more questions. Kaneko smelled something familiar about him and just kept to herself as she took the sweets from his plate. You must be Grafia, Rias talks highly of you, quite the big sister figure in her life, Naruto commented as he and the maid made their way to where the family was as Grafia held her stone-cold demeanor, but replied, I am just a simple maid to the esteemed family and support them in any way, arriving to the double doors as she knocked on the wood and heard the enter. I doubt that, but we all have our secrets, don't we? Catch you around, Snow White, he replied with a wink and was let it, not glimpsing the light twitch in her eye at the nickname. Naruto looked around and found the room nice as he then looked to see Zeoticus, Venilana, Surzich's and Rias on the couches. The elder trio sitting on one and Rias was on the opposite one with tea on the small table between them. He waved to the family as Rias, the only one to return the gesture with a smile to boot. A pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Uzumaki. Please sit, we have a few questions regarding your involvement with our daughter. Zeoticus greeted as his eyes focused on Naruto, like he was seeing if he could find anything that would denote him as a threat. Basic fatherly instincts really. Venilana held a softer gaze as did Surzich's, despite the mood of the room. Naruto just shrugged as he walked over and plopped himself down next to Rias, as if reacting to him. Her angry mood softened a bit as she gave him a small smile which he returned with a wink. So, I would say it's nice to finally meet the lovely family of Rias, but I guess this isn't the mood for fun conversations. He spoke as he leaned back in his seat while father, mother and son examined him. They deduced from name and appearance. He was probably a mix of Japanese and European with his fair features, easily mistaken for a human. But what was intriguing was that they sensed hefty demonic power on him, in him, and also a marginal amount of angelic power mixed in as well as several other signatures. How strange, he just held a casual smile with the silence as he let them take their time. Finally, after a small moment, Surzich's spoke first. What is your profession, Mr. Uzumaki? Asked the leader of the devils. Well, for entertainment I got several hobbies and plenty of time on them, but for feeding and taking care of myself, I'm a bounty hunter. I keep myself busy and my wallet full between both human fugitives and criminals, and of the supernatural variety. He smiled as he propped his arms over the back of the couch. His answer and the way he presented himself had the trio curious as they never heard of him until just recently. Well, time for some good old-fashioned family interrogation. How exactly did you meet our daughter, and how come we have never heard of you? Surely someone that knows our daughter would be known by us as well, Zeodicus asked now. Oh, I keep to myself mostly, nothing against you fine folks, I just like to work alone and have my alone time to boot, as for how I met your little girl, she summoned me, he replied with a shrug, as if it was a simple matter. She summoned you? Yeah, kinda like how you guys respond to desires and negative feelings, with the whole forming contracts with humans for power or that evil P system if it makes more sense, except it's the other way around between me and her, he replied as Venelana raised a brow at this. Different how? It's perfectly normal for a devil to react to another. I never said anything about being a devil, I'm actually human, least I like to think so with my current life, he said, the last part more to himself than to them really. Bullshit, demonic power can be clearly sensed within you, along with several other things, young man, Serziches said as he narrowed his eyes. I got my secrets and you have yours, Big Red, let's just leave it at that, okay? Naruto asked with a tone that was more, that's really not something I'd like to discuss with people I just met, Zeodicus, and Venelana noticed that Rias was subtly inching closer to Naruto, as she kept quiet as they grilled Naruto for info. Well, I hope you don't mind if we cut straight to the point, Mr. Uzumaki, but I hope you realize that interfering with family matters that do not concern you might put you in a bit of trouble with local authority, especially with matters such as the future of households and bloodlines. The mother spoke up as she sipped her tea as she tried being more logical and rational to Zeodicus and Serziches being the more doting and affectionate. Someone had to steer the family safely in the world of politics, nobility and the fancy stuff. Naruto just brought a hand to his chin and rubbed through his 5 o'clock shadow in thought before pointing to Venelana and replying. You mean this whole show of the royal family wanting to keep a good look for the lower class by selling out your only daughter like a nice present to one of the other noble houses, right? Gotta say you're certainly not earning Mother of the Year awards anytime soon, he summarized scrappily, as his words just really did a shit show at his observation of the whole alliance that was set up by the House of Gremory and Phoenix, while Rias had to keep a calm face, lest she crack a smile at how he handled the conversation and quash her own negative thoughts. Serziches was impressed with Naruto's crass tone, Zeodicus was holding a light frown and Venelana. I would choose my next words carefully if I were you, Mr. Uzumaki, she spoke in a way that meant she was ready to tear him open if he kept insulting. But this was Naruto, and he wasn't one to be cowed in, especially from some snobby noble who was okay with deciding how their child lived their life. Well, if you insist, I find it hard to believe you are the parents to such a lovely young woman, sure the looks pass on, but all I see is a couple that is more concerned with the image their house has with the rest of the underworld over the well-being and happiness of their daughter, really subverting the narrative when she spoke so highly of you guys. He finished as he was less than impressed by the prestigious House of Gremory, must be one of those noble clan styles that he slept through during his time at the academy back home. I give you some leeway because you can't get involved due to taking the throne, but still, you fucked up, some big brother you are. He looked to Serziches, who just looked down because he was right about that. He was always one for Rias and her happiness, yet he let this go on and told her she would be happy when clearly she won't be with the marriage. Then Alana's aura flared as she was not in a good mood, while the others were cautious. Naruto looked like he wasn't even fazed by the power she was releasing. And what would you know of the underworld hierarchy? You are not native to this realm despite the power within you, and you clearly were never taught manners by your parents to understand the importance of such events like joining houses, she questioned with a glare as Naruto just scoffed at her words. 1. My parents gave their lives in a sacrifice to protect me from a madman with global delusions on the night of my birth. Also he can get into some underage girls' panties, so yeah, I didn't exactly have anyone but myself to rely on growing up. 2. I happen to know quite a lot on how the government works around these parts, including a certain civil war that took its toll on your already recovering race, and the whole evil peace system that was finalized and put in place to replenish your losses. I choose to stay out of politics, cause that's a whole can of worms I'd rather not sink my hands into. Naruto finished as he brought out another can of soda and cracked it open, sipping before speaking again. Now before you go off on how this is for the betterment of devil kind and how someone like myself could never understand our ways, I'd like to ask you both a question, not as the faces of the house, but as parents to two wonderful young adults. He leaned forward as he brought his hands together on his lap. This had the parents pause their anger towards him and auras disappearing. Do you hate your daughter? That question just took the words out of their mouths, as the room was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock. Naruto just held his gaze while he waited on an answer. Serziches was silent like his parents, and Rias has been quiet the whole time since they called him in. What? Do you hate your daughter, despise her, see her in any light less than your darling little princess that you held in your arms when you brought her into the world and made all sorts of promises to love and cherish as she grew up? He added to the question as he sensed their shock, then anger returned full force. The hell kind of question is that? Of course we would never see her in any manner less than our family. Surziches got out as he had a heavy frown. Naruto just looked to him and shrugged. Really? Because you guys seem pretty heavy on the whole arranged marriage and having her get hitched with someone she obviously dislikes. How would you react? Oh, say this all went according to plan and the two were together. Let's say that the union brought forth a gaggle of Phoenix Grimoire Bel-Airs, but one day, you get a letter bringing grave news of Ria's death. Not to some unknown enemy or threat to your kind, but by her own hand. He continued, using the glass of the coffee table and some small illusion magic to play what-if scenario of the wedding and how life would be between the two young adults was not for the faint of heart. Now I might be stretching a bit with Riser here, but if I got my knowledge right, the houses cannot interfere with each other's personal affairs, neither can the ruling council with you four. Now what do we know about Riser Phoenix? Well, for starters, Hess arrogant, believes Hess of higher standing due to his house and blood, selfish, and a major prick to be around. Not to mention Hess driven by 3 of the 7 sins your kind is well versed in, those 3 being pride, greed and lust, so, going with the small laws of non-interference, what's to stop Riser from slapping an evil piece in Ria's on the night of the honeymoon to solidify his hold on her and make sure not a peep of her horrid love life is uttered to you? He asked as he played the scenario out before the family, having the decency to at least pixelate the lust-driven night and seeing the gazes of parents and son fixated on her crying and depressed face. What could cause you to envision such a thing between them? Surziches asked as Zeodicus and Venelana could only watch as the scenario played out with a broken Rias in her bed, closing her eyes one last time, as she had used a magic blade to carve her arms open from elbows to wrist, bleeding out as she would be found and a blanket placed over her. The last scene showing a grieving family and a grave being lowered into the ground. Being a bounty hunter has its share of unsavory contracts. Back when I was starting out my new career, I wanted to help everyone I could no matter what, ignorant to those putting on a show and begging for partners, servants and others to come back. I was just too naive to see the bigger picture. From a young age, I was taught by my teachers to help others in need and see the good side of things in people. It took me a little while before realizing that some people would abuse my good nature and help to get their toys back. So now, if someone attempts to use my services to continue whatever relationship they might claim, I make sure they pay up with a far greater price. It's funny, humans view themselves with a sense of superiority in a way that almost mimics other races, but they have no issues engaging in acts of cruelty and torment on their fellow man, women or children. You could say I had changed my views about my race and how I worked for those enlisting my services after seeing just how deplorable mankind can get in regards to Riser Phoenix. I saw a similar problem occurring and decided to nip it before it got out of hand and at the same time help Rias out so she could win on her own and not have to rely heavily on the resident vessel of Drake. He spoke as he waved a hand, the glass resuming its transparency. I chose to help Rias out, not for some ulterior motive or profit as you might think, but because I saw that beyond the obvious differences in species and so on, a little girl was scared for her future and believed she turned her own family on herself. So yes, you could say I'm interfering with your culture, but only out of a genuine desire to help someone in need and set her up so she and others won't have to find themselves in situations like these. Doesn't help when you got the local horror stories going about every now and then regarding bad seeds and getting their hands on the little red game pieces. Plus, I hear you're quite different than the rest when it comes to servants, so not everyone treats their followers like family. He sipped his drink as he finished his little spiel as he looked to Rias after feeling her move close and resting her head on his shoulder, his arm gently coming around her shoulders in a supportive hug. He could sense Ria's emotions were a whirlwind right now and smelt the small number of tears building up in her eyes. Zeodicus and Venelana watched how their little girl was with Naruto and her telltale signs of tearing up as Zeodicus cleared his throat. Mr. Uzumaki, would you please step outside for a moment? We would like to have a moment with Rias. He nodded and was about to move, but felt her hand gently grasp his jacket. He moved a hand over hers and replied as she looked up to him, it's okay, it'll be right outside the door. He ushered as his thumb rubbed over her knuckles. His warm smile helped her as she moved away and let him go so Naruto could step out of the room and she brought a sleeve up to her face to wipe some budding tears. Zeodicus and Venelana moved from their spot and took seats at her sides as their arms came around her to comfort and console their daughter. They realized that they were pushing her away all this time with the arrangement and not seeing its effect. Naruto opened the door to leave as he was surprised to be joined by Surziches, but welcomed the company as he nodded for Grafia to follow the two young men. Naruto catching Ria's question to her parents before the door closed. Was I a bad child? Hope you don't mind the company. I feel it is best for mother and father to have their time with my sister and mend the strained bonds. Also, I wanted to ask you a few questions about yourself if you don't mind. The Lucifer proposed as Naruto just shrugged and nodded to go ahead as Surziches just lead them through one of the many halls away from the guests. Where are you from? And I could also ask, what are your thoughts about humankind and the other races such as we devils? Surziches was curious. Here was a stranger who he knew nothing of and helped Rias with a little deal, no strings attached in his own words. But something about Naruto was interesting. He reeked of demonic power and other types as well, but he still felt human beyond looks. No evil piece within him could be sensed either, or any of the powers of the remaining noble houses. Anything he could get from Rias was that he was a friend of hers, and he helped train her. I would say upstairs, but truth is I am just a new guy in the neighborhood. My old home is out there and to be honest, I'm liking my life here. As for your other question, it'll be simple. I've seen and dealt with worse than what I explained earlier when asked. Slavery, genocide, war, corruption, it's not pretty, and I grew out of my innocent views from when I was younger. I won't turn around and say humans are better than devils and vice versa, or the angels for that matter, the fallen included. The way I see things is that you all have your high points and low points. For example, I know about the Civil War. Your kind had gone through a while after the Great War, and the reasonings behind the implementation of the evil peace system. What I would say is that yes, there are flaws here and there, but you can fix these issues with time and effort. He answered as Surziches was impressed. Naruto spoke like someone who experienced loss and troubles and wanted to focus on a better tomorrow. How interesting. You sound like a bit of a philosopher there. Back home I was part of a nation that bred children for combat and had my fair share of life and death situations. Not to mention I was thrust into a war in my late teens with a target on my back since I was born. Guess it comes with being an orphan with a dream of peace. He replied as Surziches and Grafia shared a look. War was never pretty, and as both had experienced, children should take no part in it. What kind of culture was his like? I see. How old are you? You look close to my age, Mr. Uzumaki. Was his next question when Naruto spoke up. Call me Naruto, I'm only a few hundred years old, give or take a decade. I'd rather not go with having my last name be so formal all the time. The red-haired king nodded to his request. Now Naruto wanted to ask something. Now that you know a few things about me and a small secret about my past, I hope you don't mind me asking you something personal. Naruto turned to the two as they noticed he cast a small silence bubble around them before asking. What's this about you getting with a human and lying to everyone that you and Snow White here got together? Sure, I can understand the motive as interspecies romance is frowned upon, but to your own family? That instant the final word left his lips, he was slammed against the wall with arm to throat, and a pod sphere aimed at his chest by Surziches, several sharp icicles having been formed and aimed at his vitals by Grafia, as both glared at him with caution and suspicion. How the hell do you know of that? Normally Surziches wasn't a hard man to anger. Hell, he was quite like Naruto in regards for waking up with a smile every morning and ready to have a good day. It's just whenever someone, some guy that your sister knew of, brings up a well-kept secret that has hidden from everyone, including his own parents and sister. It just made him suspicious of Naruto's intentions. And just what the hell was he planning with something so juicy as that detail about his human wife? Easy there, Big Red. I'm not going to get a megaphone and say that in front of the news station. Also you might want to back up, don't want to ruin your clothes with blood. He glanced down as Surziches followed and found in Naruto's right hand was a holy dagger. The handle, pommel and guard were blue and gold and fancy in design, but the blade itself was a glossy silver that glowed with light. Holy light. Took him a second to realize he was staring at the dagger that once belonged to the legendary King Arthur. The blade was about an inch away from piercing his sternum as the holy light from the blade had begun burning away at his clothes. Are you a spy? He questions as Naruto just laughed at that. That's good. But no, spying would imply I intend to use that information against you. Don't worry, your little secret between you, your human lover, and the lovely maid here is safe with me. Seeing no ill intent in Naruto's face, Surziches dismissed his power and let Naruto go. The ice shards vanishing as well with Naruto putting his dagger away in his jacket. How did you find that out, Mr. Uzumaki? We made sure to be quite discreet about my lord's secret love, Grafia asked as she sensed the silence barrier was still up, at least thankful he was keeping good on his word about this not being found out. That kid of yours, despite having more of his father's genes than his mother's, has the faint traces of human blood flowing through his veins, thus Hesycambian. But that's hard to really tell when he looks and feels just like you in terms of his demonic power. That enters not a drop of your power within him, despite your role as public mother and wife. Naruto answered as he looked to Surziches and Grafia respectively. Also, I'm not the first human to be tossed into the underworld, so I'm guessing you met her rather recently and helped her survive the rather harsh and inhuman climate for all these decades, am I right? He asked as Surziches cold help but nod to Naruto. Yes, she survived in this realm well, despite the curse she was afflicted with upon her arrival into hell. I found her hiding out in an old temple dedicated to one the ancestors of Devilkind during the Civil War and took her in. We grew close over the time, and recently after little Milikas was born, I had discovered the curse on her is slowly consuming her body. I've tried my best attempts to stall and stop it, but I'm afraid she's getting weaker by the day. Surziches admitted as for some reason he felt Naruto deserved to know such private information. Grafia remained silent as she had also gotten to be good friends with a lovely woman. Naruto just hummed to himself as he pulled the glove off his left hand asked, does her curse look something like this? he questioned and held his hand up to the king and mate as they saw that his hand was covered in the stained glass tattoo markings of dark and warm coloration. The back of his hand had the same rose icon that Ria's now had over her heart as his fingers were left untouched besides the nails painted black. The detailing did look familiar to what was happening to the dear wife of Serzich's as he cleared his throat. Yes, it does. How exactly did you figure out such a coincidence? He asked as Naruto put his glove back on and gave a light smile. Well, going off your description of her showing up, the curse and the timeline of when I arrived, I happen to know this woman. She was a good friend to me early on, and I happen to know of a way to help you save her. He said with a determined look as Serzich's and Graphia's eyes widened and since he was not lying, with a look they shared, they nodded and asked him to follow them as they guided him to a more secluded wing of the manor, close to Serzich's room as the redhead opened the door, being greeted by his son who was a good boy and stayed at his mother's side in her illness. Father, you're here, Shes started coughing again. Milikas commented out in a sad tone as he then noticed Naruto and wanted to comment, but Naruto's gaze was on the occupant in the lofty bed. Been a long time since he saw her. Miriam, he got a weak smile from the pale woman as she looked clammy. Hello, Jebel. Back in the study, Riaz was being held by her parents as they had managed to get through the bulk of her long-built worries about her family not wanting her. Both parents knew they were perhaps a bit eager for the cause, and they should have been more open and thoughtful to how it would well for their daughter. We are so sorry that we were blind to your fears and never took the time to reconsider this union. Riaz, we're horrible parents, Zeodicus lamented as he rubbed Ria's back while her mother stroked her long red locks. We would never hate you, Riaz Venelana added as she held her little girl close. Perhaps some family time was needed to mend things together and focus on the new things, like the potential issues from the arranged marriage not going through. Well, best to handle it when the time comes. For now, focus on the present. Come, let's go get Serzich's and see what can be done with the party that was thrown in advance. Maybe later we can take a small vacation together. No business, no school, just all of us enjoying the fun together. Does that sound good? She asked as Riaz nodded and smiled. Might take a bit, but she was more than happy to reconnect and fully trust her parents, to forgive them of their mistake. The trio then made their way out of the study and to where Serzich's was as they were none the wiser about Big Bro's big secret. You look well, I remember you being blonde when we were still upstairs. All those years ago. Naruto had pulled a chair over and sat at the side of the bed as he and Miriam caught up, like old friends. Very funny, you were blonde as well, though your hair seems to have a bit of the blonde remaining compared to mine. Pausing to drink some water from the glass on the nightstand. I heard you've been quite busy over the years. She smiled as a small pink pixie with 4 arms, known as a Caraboss, a type of cousin to the fairy race, peeked out from Miriam's flower pot on her nightstand and waved to Naruto. Hi master, he waved to the small creature as he felt Miriam's hand on his knee and a concerned look in her weary eyes. Did you find them? She asked as Naruto knew who she was asking about. He just gave a sad smile and patted her hand, responding, I did, they didn't make it, and I made sure to give them proper burials, he answered as Miriam closed her eyes and exhaled, those poor children. I heard the curse was consuming to you, Miriam, I'm here to put a stop to it, he said as this caught her attention as she looked to him. You can remove it. No, unfortunately, once bound, it's permanent, but I can permanently halt its spread and let you live with Big Red and the cute little family you're a part of, he said as he summoned a familiar black and gold book, one that the others recognized. Is that? Graphia asked as Serzich's spoke. The Libra Logoth, the occult book in the Enochian tongue, desired by many for its ability to summon demons and commune with the angels, also believed to be the source of the great calamity that consumed almost all of London in the 18th century during the eruption of Mount Laki. How do you have it, Naruto, or is it Jebel? He asked as he was curious why Miriam called him that. Naruto just smiled. Jebel was the name I took during my short time upstairs when I arrived. Miriam had some trouble with my real name, so she called me Jebel. It stuck. As for this little tome, it's mine after I pried it from the cold dead hands of the alchemists that did this to us as they were dragged to hell as well. Did a few favors for the angels to fill out some things in the book as well. He replied with a shrug and looked to Miriam. Alfred is still around and kicking, has taken a vow to remain down here as punishment for his time with the guild in the project, even though he turned against them for us in the end. Maybe you can knock some sense into his old head and visit him as Hess holed up in my place, he offered as Miriam smiled and nodded. The old alchemist was like a father to her and the children and tried to stop the ritual as he saw it was completely immoral and dangerous. Naruto opened the book and flipped through pages as he began speaking the old tongue. The page glowed as the runes and letters floated off the page and above Miriam, forming a runic circle above her form as he kept going. This might hurt a little, Miriam, apologies, he said as he resumed, the glyph glowing as small jolts of power danced over it. Naruto pointed his hand to her, and with a final word, the spell rushed down and poured over her body. The pain had her hiss and groan as her body strained and spasmed. Everyone watched as the black symbol slithered over her body to the edges of her limbs and up her neck. The small huff of power had exhumed from her body as the seals finished imprinting on her as she collapsed on the bed bed, Grafie immediately moved in to check and sensed she was alright, inhaling deep breaths as her eyes opened and she looked to the concerned group. "All done, how do you feel?" Naruto asked as Miriam raised a hand and hit him with a blast of magic water. She moved to sit up as she felt better. In fact, there was no gnawing feeling in her bones from the demonic essence. She moved her limbs and checked herself as she smiled. "I'm not ill. Yeah, it was easier to perform for you as your level of corruption isn't as big as mine. Plus made some changes from when it was done for me," he commented as he dried off, and Miriam hugged her husband, son and best friend. "Thank you," she told him as he just smiled with a bow and put the book away as he made his way to leave and let them have their moment. "Now if y'all excuse me, I am starving, also might want to get a few chairs." Big Red, Naruto had opened the door as Rias, Venilana and Zeoticus were at the doorway, surprise on their faces as they looked at the scene. Naruto passed by and winked to Rias as he closed the door behind the family to let Surziches explain himself to his parents. He made his way back to the party and picked up his dish. Finding out his sweets were taken as he just grabbed some more and resumed his meal. He finished and thanked the chefs in charge and even tipped them generously as he felt someone push him from behind, which felt like a soft object being thrown at him really, turning to see Ravel Phoenix with a scowl. He also saw Riser's peerage and his family except Riser himself and another there as well, all concerned and wanting answers. "What did you do to my brother?" the small blonde demanded as this drew everyone's attention. The Gremory family having returned as they planned to talk later as Rias was in a red dress to fit the occasion. "Nothing big, just put him in a bad dream," he answered with a shrug. "Liar." Hess screaming bloody murder like Hess being tortured. One of his peerage called out as they had been with the guy since the game ended, watching as the medics could do nothing to break the magic over him as he arrived in the bed wailing "Don't hurt her, take me instead." It was a heartbreaking sight for one such as him that was so cocky and arrogant to be broken and raving, unknown to everyone. Someone had arrived and was making his way through the crowd politely to the Phoenix family. "Could you please reverse whatever you did to my son, young man? Also, how are you able to do such a thing? We Phoenix have a natural immunity to illusions," the mother, Cassandra Phoenix, asked as well both parents were wanting to curb their son of his ego after his loss. The current spell he was under had them worried. Naruto just snapped his fingers as he dismissed his own work over Riser, who had calmed once it was broken. Naruto was about to reply when another voice was heard as he sensed a friend, having him mutter "Here we go." The room darkened as everyone watched tendrils of ash and embers form before them to show images of humanity within the country of Europe during the 18th century. The year was 1783 as mankind had entered the Industrial Revolution. With the rise of the age of progression and discovery, the people enjoyed the new benefits and luxuries afforded thanks to the help of science and technology. However, not everyone was content with this massive shift in culture. The image shift from the people to the inside of a large church, where a group of priests and scholars were convened around a large table arguing and so on. The church, fearing that the new age would see the dissolution and abandonment of their wealthy patrons and their followers, turned to the alchemy guild of their order with an idea, a message in which to secure their standing and not be forgotten by the people. The alchemist had gone about gathering orphans from the streets as they turned were gifted demonic crystals that was in the possession of the church, with the necessary components and an old book they've kept to themselves. They set about creating the Shardbinders, humans fused with the demonic crystals and its energies, in order to offer up to hell and summon demons to answer their call. However, they found out all their sacrifices were not working as one by one, each child was consumed by the power implanted in them. The next scene showing the experiments the orphans went through, the power being put into them, then seeing them scream and go into a seizure upon the altar as the crystal burned them to ashes as only the gems remained. For some it was a horrid sight as they cold-stomached the view, Asia looking away as Issei hugged her while he watched the scene of a blonde-haired Miriam being sacrificed. Had Surziches put a comforting arm around her as her family gave her looks of sympathy and remorse, seeing what she went through. But their time running short and on their last sacrifice, they were all but ready to report their failure to the church. But against all odds, it worked. The young boy known as Jebel proved to be the perfect conduit as he had adapted to the demon power far better than the others, and the ritual was completed upon his sacrifice. Countless demons poured forth through the gateway that was opened and rained hellfire upon the city. Just as Mount Laki had erupted and blanketed the countryside in darkness, thousands perished as a result of the foolish plans, and the church did their best to cleanse the world of the demonic invasion and any evidence of the events that transpired. All related to the Shardbinder experiment were killed by the demons, thus leaving the church to wipe their hands of the mess. In a few decades, it was all but forgotten by mankind as they entered the 19th century. What happened to Jebel is unknown as he disappeared without a trace in the underworld. The person finished as the scenes showed Naruto's sacrifice. A demon invasion and the church working overtime to stop it as all records of their plan were destroyed. A few angels even having to step in and wipe the horrible memories away from the survivors as it was blamed on the Laki volcano for the disaster. The following scene showed those youths that were sacrificed were cast into hell during the Devil's Civil War. Each child didn't last long as the purity of their souls attracted the beasts of hell, and they were devoured and torn apart. Miriam ended up taking residence in the church she would be found in, as the last scene showed a young Naruto actually surviving as he had fight in him. The boy knee-deep in dead demons and wielding a makeshift weapon as he had injuries, but kept fighting them off as the curse could be seen growing on his chest through his tattered clothes. It was fascinating to see when he slew a demon, its body and blood crystallized and morphed into a large shard and stabbed into him as he absorbed its power and used their own abilities against them. The last scene showed a slightly older Naruto making his way deeper into hell and away from the devil civilization as their war was reaching its end. The liberal Ogoth in his pack he had along with other things as he had a smile on his face. With a pulse of wind magic, Naruto dispersed the show as he gave a casual smile to the guy who just arrived and gave a little backstory about him. The evening, Roxas didn't think you'd show up considering your distastes for big shows like this. He chuckled as the newly introduced Roxas just shrugged and adjusted his glasses. I wouldn't have, but I heard about my dear brother getting his ass handed to him in the rating game from Ms. Grimmery with her new powers, and hearing you showed up as well. Now, what did you do to my idiot brother? He asked as he folded his arms. Clearly the two knew each other well, as the Phoenix family was surprised to see their second-born was back, having left the underworld a while back after a shouting match with Lord Phoenix. Nothing really, just gave him a taste of his own medicine and used his weakness against him. Naruto motioned to Ravel, and then Surzich's as this confused the two. Roxas sighed and ran a hand through his blonde hair. I see, did you have to use your dream devour spell on him? He asked as he plucked a drink from one of the trays. Would you rather I toyed with him, instead? Naruto asked as Roxas just frowned at the thought. No, I'd rather you don't leave him a crippled vegetable chowing on his tongue for the rest of his life. How's your hunting going? Any big hits lately? He replied as the Phoenix then felt a hug and looked to see Ravel, who was happy and upset with him leaving a while back. Roxas, where have you been? He just smiled and ruffled her hair as he greeted his family. Sure, he left home and wanted nothing to do with politics as father wanted of him, but he did keep in touch with his mother. Hey, sister, sorry I gave you a scare and left. How's everyone doing? He asked as he was approached by his family. Things were going to resume, if not for Riser showing up in a burst of flame from his summoned crest, and he didn't look the best really, soaked in sweat, bloodshot eyes, and rather pale, looking like he relived his worst nightmares on loop. Staring at Naruto as the Phoenix family went to collect him, but Roxas motioned for them to wait. Moments passing as Riser and Naruto stared at each other, then the Phoenix heir did the unthinkable. He bowed, getting on hands and knees like the Japanese did. I want to apologize for how Naruto cleared his throat as he corrected Riser, directing his attention to the real person he should apologize to. Oh, you should apologize to me, kid, that's for her. He pointed to Riaz who looked unsure but kept her composure as Riser directed himself to the redhead. I wish to apologize for my actions and behavior against you and your family, Riaz. I have been greedy, arrogant and an ass unbecoming of my house and wish to change my ways before they consume me. I hereby renounce my desire for your hand in marriage and wish that we could start over as friends, he said as this stunned just about everyone, save for Naruto and Roxas. Riaz thought it over for a bit before she nodded and saw no issues with giving him another go, as he was a changed man from what she saw, catching the small wink Naruto sent to her. Apology accepted, Riser Phoenix, maybe we can be good friends in time, she replied with a smile, as Riser stood up and nodded with a smile as he went with his family, seeing as now was a good moment. Surzich's announced the end of the party as he was more concerned with private affairs, like the talk with his family regarding the lie he sold. Okay, this has been a truly eventful party, and unfortunately, it's about time we wrap this all up, would you all agree? He asked as many agreed and things were being closed. However, someone had wanted something of Naruto as he found an old man from the house Nibiria smiling to him. Can I help you? Yes, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Lord Phoenix and heard you were a bounty hunter. I was wondering if I could request your services, young man. He asked nicely as Naruto could smell the pride coming off this guy and knew a few things about his house and one of its members, so he figured to enlighten him. Sure, who is the target? He asked as the man's demeanor shifted. Happy was now mad, glowering as just thinking about that bitch had him in a bad mood with her actions and the slander on the family name. Yes, there is a wench that has cost me greatly and murdered a member of my house upon being drunk with power. She goes by the name of Kuroka Taoju, and she's a very dangerous criminal, one of our highest. He brought out a wanted notice and showed it to Naruto as he looked over the photo of the feline beauty and the price on her head, Riaz. Her family and peerage stood by as they watched the exchange, as no one noticed Kaneko stiffen at the mention of her estranged sister. Naruto took the paper offered, and without a wasted moment, the item burst into flames and fell to the floor as ashes. Sorry, I can't accept this particular bounty, he said as this upset the old devil, who was clearly showing his displeasure at being rebuffed. "Excuse me, do you have any idea who you are talking to?" he questioned as Naruto just picked something out of his jacket and flicked it to the Nibirius clan leader. He caught it and opened his hand to see an evil piece with several cracks and chips along it. "The bishop, I can't accept the contract because said individual is already dead. That is the position she was given when she was brought into your house, right? Now I'm not part of this whole system, but I'm positive the removal of a piece results in death or the person is killed and the piece is ejected, right?" He said as the devil nodded dumbly, more surprised that he could enact his vengeance on Kuroka himself for her defiance. "I take it you have the reward on hand for her bounty?" Naruto asked as he might as well make good here as Lord Nibirius compassed himself and nodded, snapping his fingers as he summoned a briefcase full of cash and handed it to him. Naruto took the handle and gave a nod. "Pleasure doing business." With that, he turned to make his leave, but stopped before the Gremory group. He gave a smile and reached out with a hand to Surzich's, who returned and shook his hand. "I'd make some changes to this game that you guys set up, make the rules fair." Pipsqueak got lucky with his obsession with ladies, and she was kind enough to accept a second chance, even if she was working with the enemy as the church says. Not many people like having no say in being chosen and being a servant for another. He spoke while pointing to Issei and Asia as Surzicha saw logic and would speak to the other leaders about the raiding game's rules. "Thank you for helping my family, Naruto. If you're ever around, feel free to stop by," the Lucifer leader said with a happy look as Naruto saw no issues with that. He got a hug from Miriam as he slipped a small piece of paper in her hand with a phone number on it, winking so she could keep in touch as he said his goodbyes to the rest of the group. Rias was the last one to see him go as she hopped in his arms with a strong hug, her wings hugging around him as he chuckled. "Thank you for everything, Naruto." She broke their hug and slipped the phoenix tears she got earlier from Yubaluna in his jacket pocket. When no one noticed, he just ruffled her hair and nodded. "That was all you, Rias, you don't need to thank me for anything. Friends stick together, right?" He grinned as she hugged him again, just enjoying the moment before she separated and let him out of her house. "See you around, Princes," he called out as she waved and closed the door before returning to her peerage, noticing someone was missing. "Hey, where's Kaneko?" Naruto had brought out a pair of keys connected to a small keychain of a rabbit's foot, pressing the unlock button as a car materialized right in front of him in the entrance. The car itself was a slick-looking hot rod with a black body and red flames running along the front, looked like it hopped straight out of the pages of a car collector's wet dream. He put the money in the passenger seat and went to the driver's spot when he paused and turned to see Kaneko standing there. Nothing was said as he felt her emotions: resentment, anger, pain, fear and love. "Is Kuroka really dead?" she asked, biting her cheek to get the words out, her eyes looking at him wanting to answer her. Naruto knew who she was, seeing as he was a close friend to the feisty cat. He let out a sigh as he knew this might be a thing. He hated bearing bad news for others. "You're her sister, Kaneko, right?" He got a nod as an answer and just folded his arms, prepared to break her heart with the truth. "Thought so. Truth be told, she was a good friend of mine. She honestly wouldn't shut up when it came to you, her beloved and sweet sister. You still care for her," he commented at her silence as he picked up the lingering emotion she tried so hard to quash. "Is it really noticeable?" she asked with a small whimper at the end. Naruto knelt to her level as he added, reaching out to rub her shoulder in comfort. "Nothing wrong with that. Despite her abandonment of you and that hate, you still remember the good memories of her tucking you in at night and making sure you had a warm meal and a place to live when you two were alone. She thought the world of you and wanted only the best, even when she went crazy with Senjutsu and went on a rampage. She never harmed you when she was still around. She always wanted to see you again, to make sure you were living a good life that she tried her best to give you before it went to shit. She would be happy if she saw you now, with nice friends and well on your way to finishing school," he said as he saw she was starting to tear up, his words getting to her. "How did she die?" she asked, her voice wavering as she did her best to try and stop her tears. Naruto looked down as he thought for a moment, but relented and answered. "Even though we were close friends, she knew my profession and feared I would bring her in for the crime she was guilty of. No matter how many times I assured her I would never do such a thing, the thought remained and grew. It was several years ago when her paranoia broke and she ran off. I gave chase trying to calm her down in a big game of cat and mouse, as she ended up taking her own life before I could get to her. All that remained was that evil piece you saw earlier. I'm so sorry for taking her from you," he finished as Kaneko had her head down and he saw tears hitting the ground. Now he felt like real shit as he could hear Kaneko's light whining as she cried over the loss of her sister. "Hey, I got something for you. Think of it as a gift from your late sister." Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a kitten that looked adorable with its black and white fur, though three things stood out. The kitten had two little horn nubs growing from above its eyes, its ears were bat-like, and it was about as big as Kaneko's torso. She wiped her eyes and looked at the infant cat in wonder as she's never seen such a specimen before. Naruto Naruto gently offered the kitty to her, as she tenderly accepted and held it like one would a newborn. Hiroka was caring for some cats that I had as I was busy with work, spoiling them plenty as they grew up to be quite lovely. This little girl right here was the runt of the litter the mother gave birth to, and something tells me Kuroka would want you to have a cat that she owned, he said as Kaneko looked at the kitty as it woke up from its nap and mewed. Reaching and pawing at her face as Kaneko couldn't help but smile, Naruto stood up and got in his car as he let Kaneko move away as the engine roared to life. He reached and ruffled Kaneko's hair as he gave a small smile. See you around, Kaneko. With that he drove off as Kaneko watched him go before returning to the house, new friend in tow as she was thinking of a name for her new companion. She also felt something when Naruto put his hand on her, it was Senjutsu. Elsewhere, where am I? The woman asked herself as she was coming to. This wasn't what she expected death to be. Finding herself in a cell as she was on the bed, a fireplace built into the back wall and burning blue flames, she was happy her clothes were still on, but the inclusion of a chain and cuff around both her ankles was annoying as she tried using her light spear to break it, only for the spear to fizzle out the moment it made contact with the dark metal. She tugged at it as it was impervious to anything she tried as she looked around. Palwarna wondered where exactly she was and how did she avoid death, as the last thing she remembered was being hit by Ria's pod when the group came in to save Asia from the Fallen's plan to extract her sacred gear. Back home in the shinobi world, a couple years after the end of the Fourth War and Naruto's death, peace was at an all-time high as the villages were getting along happily, Minato retaking Tohokage reins as he did something interesting. Before Hiri took the position, he approached Fugaku and offered to split the title between the two of them, citing that the past mistakes of the previous Kage always came down to the sole leader's decision and wanted to change those rules. He stated that the exclusion of the Uchiha was one such mistake that should no longer be in effect and wanted to bring the clan back into the village wholly. Fugaku was hesitant at first, believing this to be a sham, but Itachi and Sasuke had convinced him that Minato was genuine with his offer and wanting to change the rules of the village. So he ultimately accepted as both Minato and Fugaku became the first dual Hokage as they worked together to help the village and its people. Fugaku had appointed Itachi as head of the police force in his stead as Sasuke went on his reconnaissance mission and atonement for his bad deeds, but stopping by often for his family and to see Sakura. Kiba knocked on the doors of the main Hyuga complex as he was wondering how Hinata was as she took the death of Naruto the hardest out of them all, more so than his parents. He did care for her like a little sister and hoped she hadn't done anything drastic. The doors opened as he was greeted by her father and mother, Hiashi and Hinoka. Hey, is Hinata home? I was wondering if she was available for lunch, he asked as Hiashi was with his usual stern look as Hinoka smiled, knowing her teammate was looking out for the young woman as she replied. She is, just a moment and shall be ready. She left as Kiba and Hiashi stood there, a moment of silence as Kiba cleared his throat. So, how's the family going? He asked in an attempt to lighten the mood as Hiashi just let out a sigh and replied, it is well, in Yuzuka, however, my daughter has kept herself stooped up in her room, depressed over the loss of Naruto Uzumaki. We have tried everything, but nothing is getting through to her. Hopefully you and her team might have luck where we do not. He admitted as he ignored the Hyuga elder's sneers about Hinata as the father in him wanted his girl to overcome her depression. Hoka returned with Hinata as Kiba held back a wince. She was gloomy, bags under her bloodshot eyes as he could tell she wasn't getting enough sleep. Hey Hinata, you want to grab a bite? My treat, he offered as she smiled and hugged her parents before going off with Kiba. He led her to a restaurant as he got them some seats and drinks, noting her silence as she was receding into herself. He knew her affection for Naruto and how much he meant to her, even if the Dumbus wasn't even receptive to her obvious signs. Hell, he missed him too. They all did, but they all came to accept his loss and move on as several got together, like Sasuke and Sakura, to no one's surprise. How are you doing Hinata, you feel alright? He asked as he was trying to get her to open up. It was like a tug of war as he watched her sit there and stare at her menu with a blank look. The waiter took his order as he said to give Hinata some more time as she didn't even respond to him when asked. Kiba just bit his cheek as he scratched his brain for something that would get Hinata out of her self-imposed isolation. That's when it hit him. It was a stupid idea and he barely recalled that night he and Naruto went out for drinks. Kiba, you're a genius. This might work, and we need to stop by the memorial stone later to pray in hopes we don't get haunted by Naruto's ghost, he thought to himself, his hand coming to go over hers as her eyes snapped to him. He swallowed as he prepared to spill the beans, hoping that Naruto's ghost didn't come after him for this, as the whole thing was a drunken dare anyways. Hey, I remembered that Naruto visited the hospital a while back, something about a new donation drive for a bank inside. The place might still have something of his if you want to take a look after lunch, okay? he said as her eyes brightened as she put the pieces together. The words seemed to have lit a fire within her as she waved for a waiter and ordered her meal as Kiba couldn't help but smile as Hinata was coming back. Flashback. It was the years of the Civil War in the United States of America, North versus South. The war itself was going in the favor of the North with battle after battle as deep within the South. A prominent family of slavers did not like the idea of the Union winning and losing their right to slavery that they saw as a God-given right, so they turned to the occult in hopes to wish a Southern victory and curse the North for their heresy. Using all their slaves they owned, they set up a blood ritual in the living room to summon a servant from hell on their behalf, gutting and butchering the scared slaves to get the ritual right as they placed body parts along the sigils and the corpse of the infant in the middle. Following some heavy chanting and offerings of the souls of the slaves, their plea worked as the house shook, candles lit up in great balls of flame, and anything glass shattered. The lights dimmed as they watched as the blood pooled into the center of the ritual, and the corpse of the child sank into the formed blood puddle. A demonic hand shot out, rather a skeleton hand as it was clawed, and the bones themselves looked monstrous. Fear was apparent in the humans as they saw the skeletal beast that emerged for their call, as it was clearly inhuman and large, around 8 to 9 feet tall, demonic, even as it had a sharp tail of sorts, large wings, and the skull of a hellish beast topped with curved horns. Standing on 2 digitigrade legs and flexing its bone hands, the eye sockets burned with red and blue energy as it was suddenly latched on by the blood, growling as the blood slid over its form, and muscles grew over the bones and organs filled the torso cavity. The shape of the beast shifting and changing as it took a more human shape and shrunk to a bit over 6 feet tall, as the muscles finished forming over the vitals, and the wings and tail sucked into the body, as the head morphed into a human head. Next the skin and features grew as the blood was being sucked into the person. The male going off the formed genitals as the final parts to grow in, was the hair that went to shoulders and claws along his fingers and toes. He was covered in blood and nude, as the crystal growth was on his chest, and grew further as it reached his shoulders and pelvis, some along his arms and legs as he opened his eyes, the color of his iris shifting from sapphire blue to ruby red and settling as a royal purple. Naruto Jebel Uzumaki was back in the human world. He examined himself as his form was toned and fit for that of a healthy young man that hit the gym a lot. He then saw the bloody remains he came through, and then the family that opened the peephole into hell that he used to arrive. Having spent what felt like an eternity down there, he needed to catch up with the times and what happened since, without wasting any time. He set upon the family of 7 and tore them apart in a fashion that would make people queasy. What had been hope and dreams of winning the Civil War had turned into a nightmare as he murdered the family of slavers within their own home using his own hands, not caring for their pleas for mercy, as they had murdered a bunch of innocents to get their wish. After crushing the skull of the last one, he explored the place and helped himself to a bath, cleaning up of the blood and gore before drying off and inspecting himself in the mirror, having to break it first as the silver properties made it hard for him to see himself. He rummaged through their closets and got himself some threads as he put on a pair of circular sunglasses and set fire to the house after going to the living room and waving a hand over the remains of the slaves. Small glass balls coming into his hand as he pocketed them in his red coat and left the manor as it burned down. He had on a pair of black boots, black trousers, a dark blue shirt that had the top closed to hide his tattoo, and a red and black pea coat over it with tails that reached the back of his knees, also a pair of red fingerless gloves. He had walked into Bayes of the South, far from the people, as he reached into his pocket and brought out those glass balls, each glowing a light blue as he looked at them and with a toss, threw them before him as each ball burst in mist and formed a slave soul. Every single soul of the slaves that were killed for him stood before him, rightly scared as even though they died, they got to see him emerging from the ritual and his murder of the family. Naruto felt pity as he put his hands together in prayer and closed his eyes to focus. "What are you doing?" a slave asked as he was an older gentleman, his wife and child next to him as they were confused. "Betting you a ride," he answered as soon the area lit up with light as Naruto stepped out of the holy rays, lest he burn under them as a honk was heard, and everyone could see a gold and pearl bus form and land right next to them, the sliding door opening up as the driver was an elderly black man with pure white clothes and smiled as he saw the group. "Come on in, fellas, next stop is paradise," the angel said with a cheerful smile as the souls all got in the bus and took their seats as the father turned to Naruto and shook his hand, a smile on his face. "Thank you, young man, our prayers have been answered," he said as he then hugged Naruto as he just patted his back and let the man go, turning to leave them as the driver called out with a whistle. "Young man, I can tell from the look that you had it hard downstairs and I'd like to help a fellow brother out. Take this and give the lovely lady a call, and she might be able to help you out with your tattoo," he said as he handed over a golden card as Naruto took it and looked it over. On it was the icon of praying hands and a cross underneath it, turning it over as he only read one word, a name. "Gabriel," he looked at the driver and pocketed the card in his breast pocket. "Thanks," the angel nodded as the doors closed, and he snapped his fingers as everyone on the bus sans him had delicious food appear on their service trays as the bus took off and playing some music as it soared into the sky and disappeared with a flash of light, smiling as he watched them go. Naruto's smile dropped into a frown as he felt something press against the back of his head and a clicking sound of a revolver being cocked. Some southern hick had snuck up on him and witnessed the whole show as he didn't like Naruto, not one a bit. What the hell is a godless niggerk? He cold finish as Naruto's eyes had shifted red with black sclera and he reacted faster than the man could pull the trigger. Naruto had turned and with one hand, grabbed the guy's extended wrist as with his other, grabbed the top of his head and chomped down on his neck as his teeth shifted to many sharp fangs and his mouth opened wider than normal. The man went down as Naruto tore through his neck like a ravenous and starving beast, pulling up as he let out a huff and raised a bloody hand with a human's heart in it, his long tongue emerging through his open mouth to lick some blood off as he settled for crushing the organ rather than eating it. Features returning to normal as he wiped the blood away with the guy's shirt and some water. He spotted some gators and gave a small whistle as they swam over and he tossed the body and head into the swamp for them to enjoy. Naruto got up and dusted himself off as he inspected the revolver he had kept from the guy along with the holster, looking it over with curiosity as he ran a finger along the barrel, putting the gun away. He just whistled a haunting tune as he left the area. It would be days as he later showed up sitting in a chair in the center hall of the White House, having acquired a top hat since, and filing his claws down to look presentable, as well as a neat-looking walking cane, with the handle being a serpent with gem green eyes. He smiled as the doors to the Oval Office opened and he was motioned in by the security. He entered the room and looked around at the decor as he let the guard take his gun from his hip and took a seat before the desk as he looked to the current president, Abraham Lincoln. The man was busy with a document that would ensure the freedom of all slaves within the South as the war was almost over. He set it aside as he was almost done with it and turned his attention to the man before him. I hear you had come with news that should be of great concern to the top officials. Abe asked as he was informed that this Jebel has information that would be of great importance to the White House and other high positions of the government. Naruto nodded and cleared his throat. Yep, want to ask you something. What do you know of the supernatural? He asked as silence filled the room and Lincoln just looked at Naruto like he was a nutcase. At this loon out of here, one of the guards moved to grab Naruto's shoulder, but Naruto was faster, pulling the blade out from the cane, revealing it was a weapon as he aimed it along the throat of the man as it stopped him in his tracks. Naruto just blinked as with his other hand holding the wooden scabbard. He reached up and pulled his sunglasses off and tucked them in his breast pocket as he looked to Abe with his purple eyes. Easy there, figured you'd be more open, seeing as you hunted vampires in your youth in revenge for killing your mother. Also the axe under your desk is laced with silver and also turns into a rifle with silver ammo. Naruto pointed out as Abe looked to Naruto, then nodded to his guard as the man backed off as Naruto sheathed his blade. Alright, I'm listening, he replied as Naruto snapped his fingers and the window shutters closed as the conversation would be held in secret and form a little something to benefit humans in the world where the holy and unholy had the advantages above all else. In the lovely shinobi world, Kiba and Hinata had finished their lunch as they were now at the hospital. The young woman focused on what Kiba told her earlier and inwardly praying that what he said was right. The receptionist smiled and spoke up. Hello, what can I help you two with today? She asked. Hi there, we were wondering if the sperm bank was open. Kiba replied as the woman glanced to Hinata then him, are you here to donate? The lady asked as he shook his head. Actually it's for her, also we were wondering if you had a donor sample from Naruto Uzumaki. He added as the mention of his name had Hinata clench her jacket. The nurse looked at her computer and investigated the files. He is, but I'm afraid you'll have to get permission from the head doctor or the donor himself to have access to his specific semen, she answered as Hinata's hands came down on the desk, startling the lady a bit as now Ms. Hyuga was adamant about getting that seed. Kiba put a hand on her shoulder to ease Hinata as he could smell she was a bit moody now. The lady was about to call for a doctor but was promptly saved by the timely arrival of Tsunade and Sakura. Well, take over, Kaiko, Tsunade said as the two doctors came over as Kiba explained why they were there. Tsunade thought for a moment before leading them to room before the sperm storage facility. Are you sure about this, Hinata? We haven't seen you for a while, and having a child is a huge responsibility, Sakura asked as both medics studied the quiet woman. Going off her demeanor, she pretty much shut everyone out, the loss of Naruto really breaking her down into the shell before them. Hinata was silent, but managed to find words to respond eventually. Why yes, I want this, if Naruto was here, he would want this too, a chance to start a family. Together, with me, she spoke as all three had a look of sympathy and understood her motive. Tsunade placed a hand on Hinata's shoulder, while Sakura went into the cold storage to retrieve the frozen essence of her deceased friend. Look kid, I understand why you're doing this, you think this is the only way to keep holding on to Naruto, I get it, I miss him too, but he would not want you to keep clinging on to what is not there anymore, it's unhealthy, if you are going to have his kids, I want to make sure you have a clean bill of health and at 100%, doctor's orders, okay? She asked as Hinata nodded with a small smile on her face. Sakura came back with a full container in hand as it turns out, Naruto put out much more than the average man, must be an Uzumaki thing, with the amount in the container, He could knock up a dozen ladies in one night. Sakura handed it over as Hinata held the small container like it was the most precious thing in the world. Naruto's name and health information written on the tag over the plastic, she handed it back to Sakura as she felt the need to ask permission from someone for this. The Namikaze household. Minato and Kushina had finished their lunch as they heard a knock at the door, opening to find Hinata standing there. "May I come in? It's important," she asked as they did that, moving to the dinner table as Hinata accepted the glass of water offered as she stared at Naruto's parents. She saw Naruto in their features and resolved herself. This was them, her and him. "So, what can we help you with, Hinata?" Minato asked with a smile as Kushina sat next to him. Hinata swallowed the light doubt in her throat with some water and spoke. "I know I haven't been the best friend for your son. I recall the times I would always watch him from the sidelines when the village shunned him, and he had no one to turn to for companionship when we were kids. Even through our ninja careers, I was always too shy to be around him, and I blame myself that has gone." She started as while everyone knew Naruto made the decision for his life for everyone else's and could not hold themselves accountable for the outcome, Hinata felt like she could have done something and saved him from ultimately offing himself, call if selfish, but she hated herself for not doing anything and being too weak to stand by him. Kushina saw where this was going easily. "Hey, it's not your fault. My son made his choice. We can't blame ourselves when he chose the many over one, no matter how much it hurts." She spoke softly as the parents were coping and slowly getting over it, the two considering for another child, to fill the void left by Naruto, and be the parents they wanted to be. Hinata pushed back the thought of breaking down again as she collected herself and continued. "I recently found out that Naruto had left a bit of himself at the hospital with the sperm bank opening a while ago, and so I came here to ask." Hinata downed her water, stood up and bowed on all fours with forehead to the floor before Minato and Kushina. "Please, let me bear your grandchildren." She asked them as in her heart she knew that Naruto would return her love and they would have been together if he was still around. Minato and Kushina looked to each other as they thought about what she asked for and came to a decision. A few months later, the Byakugan Princess incident. The city of Konoha was in panic as it was midnight with a full moon that looked larger than normal. The reason why there was panic was because the moon was falling out of orbit and on a one-way collision course to the world. Also that there was an army of puppets that had come for Hinata as they had already captured her sister Hanabi days ago. The whole mastermind to this event was a young man by the name of Toneri Otsutsuki, who baited out Hinata using her sister and snagged the young woman he wanted as his bride before he would crash the moon into the planet and kill all life. His reasoning is that humanity had come to misuse the gift of chakra and thus needed to be exterminated to rectify this wrongdoing. While everyone was being fended off by the autonomous puppets that served him, Toneri himself was sailing away on his summoned bird with the Hyuga sisters in tow. Hanabi was held against her will, while Hinata was coerced into marrying him if he halted his extermination attempt on the world, Toneri promising as he was a man of his word. He was already getting higher in the sky and away from the village when a familiar portal opened before his right and Kagaya emerged from it. "May I ask what it is you are doing, young man?" She started as the bird came to a screeching halt in the air in front of her, as Toneri was shocked at seeing the mother of all chakra before him. He had assumed she was sealed away after the war during his occasional glimpses of watching the world. "Lady Kagaya, I thought you had been sealed away. It's an honor to be in your presence." Toneri started with a bow as he uncovered Homura's writings about his mother and came to have her old beliefs on how humans were not fit to have the gift of chakra. Kagaya's eyes examined her descendant, his right and his two passengers. She sensed a brief flicker of life within the elder sister as she then looked down to the village as she saw the shinobi struggling against the puppets. She closed her eyes and flared out her power as this got everyone, human and puppet, to stop their fighting and stare up to the rabbit goddess as she uttered one word, a name. Kamimuro. Before anyone could react, the once dead bone wielder of the Kagaya clan soared and spun through the air, shooting off bone bullets and shards from his extended limbs as each shot took out a puppet and disintegrated it on the spot throughout the village. He brought out his spine and whipped onto the bird and brought two bone pikes to Toneri's neck. All within seconds as now the young man was baffled, Kagaya opened her eyes again and spoke, authority clear in her voice. "You will cease your attempt to destroy my garden and let the people live their lives in peace. Unhand the two Hyuga now and you can walk away unharmed," she decreed as now he was shocked. How could she stand for the blatant abuse of her chakra? How the humans so easily tainted and corrupted the powers to their needs and whims. He felt the pikes press against his skin as Kamimuro kept him from acting out. "I don't understand, these people, these vermin are abusing your powers. I have watched them wage war and destroy each other, and this world, surely you cannot stand for this travesty." He retorted as Kagaya's gaze was still on him. She moved her left hand to face him and shot out a bone spike that impaled the bird in the head. The animal screeched while falling to the ground, bursting into a cloud of ash upon impact as the people nearby coughed and were covered from the ash cloud. "My word is law, and yes, I am aware the legacy the humans have made using my powers. However, I am content to let them have their time, so long as they keep the peace and do not start another conflict amongst themselves. Do I make myself clear, young man?" She finished as Toneri was in a tight spot. On one hand, he loathed how the people of this world acted and polluted chakra and wanted nothing more than to wipe the slate clean, but on the other hand, he dared not go against Kagaya Otsutsuki, knowing full well she could kill him for defiance. With a sigh, he released the binds on Hanabi as Kagaya glanced to Kimimaro, a silent command to have him let the Hyuga sisters down, as he nodded and floated down with both in tow to the ground. Thank you, Hinata started but was cut off by Kagaya's cold tone. I didn't do this for your sake, child. Cold as ever, she had her attention to Neri as she knew he was the last living descendant of her son Hamura. Well, if you discount the Hyugas, one of her portals opened behind her as she turned to it and addressed him. Accompany me, I wish to visit the resting place of my son. Toneri was quick to comply as he followed her, and the portal closed. Back on the ground, everyone was settling down, now that the threat was dealt with, and the moon was slowly shifting back into its orbit by Kagaya's power. Kimimaro vanished as soon as he let the sisters go. Hinata staring at the spot where Kagaya was with a simple though in her head. Fucking bitch. And the moon. Toneri was giving a tour of the interior of the celestial body to his superior as she remained silent, taking in the environment hidden under the cold and barren surface of the moon. Turns out the interior was full of life, though not sentient, as the civil war a while ago killed off everyone, leaving Toneri the only survivor, hence his need for companionship. She gazed up at the glowing sphere within the center, floating within rings as she knew what it was and sensed the power it gave off. As you can see, my life here is quiet and peaceful. I would watch the earth out of boredom and came to my plans before you stepped in. Please forgive my transgressions, my lady, Toneri said as he turned to Kagaya and bowed, an unsaid apology for posing a threat to her garden, now that he knows she is alive and well. Your rash actions can be forgiven for now. I'm relieving you from your duty as of today. I suggest you take time and visit my garden, perhaps walk amongst the humans and get to know them. I can say you might have your views changed with time. You're dismissed, she told him as he gave a look of confusion at such an odd order, but nodded in acceptance as he sensed there was something off about her. From the stories of Elder Hamura, she was a cold and brutal woman, but now she seemed at peace and even happy. How strange. He left Kagaya alone to do just that. As the woman let out a small exhale as she continued her walk, she stopped before a tree and examined the small stone sticking up out of the ground before it. So this was where Hamura was buried, within nature. She stared at the weathered stone and then knelt and bowed to the grave. Her failure as a mother to her two boys bubbled up within her as a few tears dropped to the grass. Over the years since she and Amaterasu had sent Naruto off and put the shinobi world at peace, the former Otsutsuki princess had taken a good look at herself. Her brief time with the young man had been an eye-opener as she recalled how she failed her boys. They were so small, so frail in her arms when she held onto the newborns and promised them many things, from the world to being a great mother for them. She was disgusted with herself with how far she fell from the happy woman bringing her children into the world. All that was left of them now was their graves and legacies. She moved to sit up and wiped her tears with the sleeve of her robe. No words were said as she reached and placed a hand on Hamura's grave. A lifetime of remorse was all that she was left with as both her boys were gone, and she blamed only herself. After a few more moments, she stood up and placed a single white lily atop the stone. She turned away and floated up to the artificial sun that powered everything around her. She passed through the large cage and floated in front of it as the light bathed her. With a hand, she reached and was almost touching it as a small flow of chakra went from it into her hand, then being absorbed into her as she felt the power being consumed, lowering her hand. She turned away from the energy sphere and opened a portal back to her personal home, summoning a few hundred white Zetsu servants to keep vigil over the moon interior and mingle in with the Biomi. With that, she left for her home through a portal as a smile bloomed on her face when she knelt over the crib she made earlier. Soft cooing greeted her ears as her eyes gazed to the little one inside. Sometime later, the Uchiha compound. Yugaku Uchiha finished his breakfast as he kissed his wife and got ready to head in for work today. Believe it or not, he was in a swell mood, his clan was doing well and no longer shackled under the old views of the elders, not to mention he finally attained his goal of becoming Hokage. Sure, he shared the position with his peer Minato, but he had no issues about it really, in his eyes. Splitting the position between two was better in the long run, as not everything could be solved by one person. The past Hokage all had their flaws that weighed them down while in office. Hashirama was too optimistic and could not stop Madara before it was too late. Tobirama was too pessimistic and his segregation of the Uchiha only made things worse. Hiruzen was too soft and let Danzo and his peers walk all over him. Minato was taken too early before any real judgment could be cast. Tsunade was level-headed and seemed to be the best of them. There were rumors Kakashi was considered for the role, but he declined and said he would prefer to be an advisor, with both Minato and Fugaku accepted. Of course, him being the sensei to their boys played a bit in this. He stepped out of the compound, only to be greeted with an issue. Standing in the main courtyard was Itachi and a member of the police force named Jiro, the other having been pissed since Itachi was handed over the reins of the force as a lot of the Uchiha members did. Fugaku just sighed as he walked over and stepped in before things got ugly. Alright, break it up you two, what's the issue? he asked as he glanced to Itachi, then Jiro. It's nothing father, just letting my subordinate air out his grievances with me running the police force, Itachi replies as he was used to the whispers and glares, after all he did butcher them all on behalf of the Leaf to prevent a coup. Bullshit, you betrayed the clan and cut us all down without a second thought, you murdered every man, woman and child for this village, the very same village that has segregated and ostracized us for decades. Now we're back, and you get rewarded for your crimes, and we are just supposed to forget about what happened that night. Jiro snarled out as there was a lot of resentment for the infamous clan killer. Kushina and Minato were stopping by when they saw what was going on. Naturally Minato wanted to help, but a glance from Fugaku had him stay back as this was clan business. Jiro couldn't take it anymore and drew his sword, pointing it at Itachi. If you won't deal with your traitorous kin, then I will. Itachi Uchiha, I challenge you for the right of the police force and your crimes of familicide. He called out as by now the whole clan was drawing a crowd, some of them agreeing with Jiro's words, as many had come to see Itachi slap on the wrist punishment for butchering every single soul, guilty and innocent, a major slap in the face of what the Uchiha clan stood for. Before a fight could break out, a majestic purple Susanoo landed in the main courtyard as Sasuke Uchiha had returned, the young man taking time to reflect on his life and working with the cages as a mediator between the nations, his avatar of power vanishing as he landed and examined the crowd, having heard everything and sensing the tension, as he decided to put a stop to this. I heard there is a bit of a disagreement on how things are going. He began as Jiro and Itachi looked at him. It was common knowledge that Sasuke had surpassed all of them, and amongst the clan, he held the real power. The young man gazing at his brother and clansman, as he rested his arm on the hilt of his sword while he spoke again. I understand the gripes you all have with what my brother did years ago. I do, well I forgave my brother for his choice, and siding with the village who spurned us, I still resent him for not sparing those that were not even involved in the planned coup, but right now, clinging to what happened in the past will not help us. Sasuke was interrupted by an Uchiha who demanded that Itachi be punished for his crimes regardless and stripped of his position. Sasuke just flared his chakra again as he spoke up, his tone clear. My brother, in all but blood, gave up his life and future so that we could have another chance and to make things right, and you want to trample on that and restart the problems that drove us to the breaking point again. He asked as all he got was silence. Why do you think Lord Namek has reached out to my father and wants to fix and reintegrate us back into our village, do away with the old views that splintered us for so long? If you're so stubborn and want to seek revenge on an old fool who was responsible for all of this, then I suggest you stop what you're doing and pay a visit the cemetery, as that man is buried alongside Lord Sarutobi. He finished as he stopped flaring his power and turned to Minato and Fugaku. Lord Hokages, apologies for the display, but I don't want the work being done to be thrown away. With that, Sasuke then walked into the compound and see about getting some of mom's cooking before he'd go visit Sakura, who was already pregnant and handling her job as well. Heard she even set up a group dedicated to helping young orphans from the war and from troubled backgrounds. A few years later, all was going well in the world, birds were singing, sun was shining, and in the Konoha General Hospital, Hinata Hyuga was busy giving birth to her second child. The young woman, a mom already as her son and his grandparents were waiting in the hallway, was in labor as Sakura was helping her out through it all. But at Hinata, I can see the head, come on another push, she instructed as Hinata let out a groan and gave another, her hands clenching the sides of the bed as she worked on bringing her second child into the world. She had taken wonderfully to motherhood and adored her son, Boruto, with all her heart, making sure to be the best mom she could be. Now here she was delivering Boruto's sibling. With another cry and contraction, Hinata pushed out the baby from her body as a small cry filled her ears while she fell back on the pillow. Sakura was quick and snipped the cord, cleaned the baby and bundled her up. It's a girl, she announced as she brought her over and gave the newborn to Hinata as she took and gazed at her baby girl, greeted back with the most adorable blue eyes as her daughter stared back to her. The Uzumaki family was let in as Sakura cleaned up and gave the family their time. Little Boruto coming up to the bed as Minato helped him up and gazing at his new sister with curiosity as the baby cracked a toothless smile. Say hello to your sister, Boruto, she said as Boruto smiled back. Welcome home, Himawari. Back in the DxD world, within the city of Kyoto, Japan. So how goes things, still beating back suitors wanting your hand, Yosaka? Amaterasu asked as she sipped her sake, the Shinto goddess of the sun having a nice lunch break with her favorite fox Yakai, and the current ruler of the Yakai faction in Japan. Said woman in question was a gorgeous lady as she was taking a break from the busy paperwork that plagued all leaders. The kitsune just smiled as she finished her sushi. You would think they would stop when I announced that I was more focused on running the city and protecting the ley lines and the people, But it only seemed to entrance them even more, she replied as she knew many wanted her on her beauty and body alone. After all, the bragging rights would be off the charts, but she was not one for a family, yet. She wanted to ensure her people and home were safe and secure in the fluctuating world before any thoughts of starting a family would take root. Amaterasu understood her reasonings why, as it was not known by many that Yusaka was orphaned as a baby. Her mother had passed away during the end of the Sengoku Jidai, after the siege of Osaka in 1615, while evading yakai hunters. Amaterasu personally stepping in and delivering the young fox to the yakai to raise and protect and coming to see her as a daughter of sorts. Yusaka barely remembered her own mother, and any questions only brought a small sad smile on Amaterasu's face, as she remembered Yusaka's mother, but never divulged to Yusaka her answers. I'm sure they'll get the message and back off sooner than later, but if push comes to shove, I'll step in on your behalf. The sun goddess smiled as Yusaka smiled again, but shook her head. While she personally had good ties with the Shinto gods, the rest of the yakai did not, as the 5 great families of Japan served them, and there was plenty of bad blood between the families and the yakai over the ages, due to humans and yakai not getting along and causing problems. Thank you, but that won't be needed. I don't need my counsel to start thinking I'm having them all put to the judgment of you and your siblings, she replied as she sipped her drink. Amaterasu nodded, as that would not help in the long run. What to do? Oh wait, she got it. Well, it just so happens that I brought over a young man here from our shared territory with Hindu pantheon and Buddhist pantheon. He was supposed to get here a century ago, but he vanished upon arrival for a while and just recently reappeared from what my sources tell me. While he is doing his own mission for a friend of mine, I am sure he could take the time out and help you out here. I could call on him if you would like, she offered as Yusaka was curious. Her own sources and spies had mentioned in passing about a peculiar individual who seemed to appear and vanish at times when there was contact between the humans and supernatural, as well as other small incidents. What intrigued her most was that while no one could get a good description or evidence of him, the report said he was cunning like a fox and tricked her spies into losing his trail over and over, also that he bore the lingering scent of a fox, a powerful one at that. Was he a kitsune that she had never met? Yusaka was the type to find out about all yakai born in the world and make sure they could be tracked and, if need be, summoned to Kyoto for their protection, as she knew the devils always craved satisfying their vices and collecting exotic races and powers to their amusement, along with the occult who would hunt and harm them for their own means. Forgive me for my question, but isn't it illegal to bring followers to this world that are not directly tied to the gods? She asked, as it was one of those fine print rules that forbade the other pantheons from bringing their followers, aka the mortals, in their territories, as the massive influx could be viewed as an invasion and just cause a shit ton of problems for everyone involved. Amaterasu just clicked her tongue and answered with, yet that rule hasn't really been enforced since the death of the almighty Christian god all those millennia ago. Besides, I know some like Zeus, Aten and a few others have skirted and bent the rules and gotten their own people in here and there to spread their influences. Besides, them technically not breaking the rule, as I've heard Hess not actively going about amassing followers like our regular priests would do. She finished and brought out a red medallion that caught Yusaka's eye. The item was carved of ruby and inlaid with obsidian, which formed a whirlpool design along its surface to the center from the edges. From what she could sense was that it reeked heavily of what felt like chakra that she and the yakai could use, but it was much more potent and powerful. This was forged from his chakra. I had taken a small sample when I initially sent him here, but since then it has been cold, but now I can feel that he is active thanks to this. I tried calling on him before, but strangely he hasn't responded. Hopefully he will this time, she said as she let Yusaka see the medallion, as the vixen had to admit it was a beautiful jewel, and she was tempted to touch and hold it. Very well, I would like to meet this young man that you vouch for. I had heard rumors of him and am curious myself as to why Hess being so elusive. Surely he has not gotten himself a criminal record with the angels and devils. She spoke as the sun goddess focused a small bit of her power into the gem and felt it finally respond. She furrowed her eyebrows as she was a bit confused. From what she gathered, he was not even on the planet or even in heaven or the underworld. Maybe this had to do with that small letter she got delivered a while back from him, saying he was in a secure location and asking about borrowing a bit of land for a project he was working on. At the time she didn't really think much of it and was okay with it, just happy to know he was safe and sound. Even if she didn't see him personally, she looked at the item with a bit of confusion and commented, strange. What is? Yusaka asked as she was curious as she watched the medallion flash and glow with the beat of a heart. From what I'm sensing, Hess not on the planet or even in the realm of the devils or angels. Her comment was cut off as they both felt a surge of power at the middle of the room they were eating lunch in and causing nearby items to vibrate, and before they could react, the air itself began to crack like glass before opening up like a window shattering. The other side of this portal was nothing but oozing black void as they both heard all sorts of strange and monstrous growls and groans, even a few layered whispers that sounded like warnings. Bow down to the Lord of Darkness. Look upon his greatness and obey his orders, or you will die, here and now. Both women were on edge as they heard heavy footsteps before a familiar face emerged from the void, clad in his black, gold and red attire, as he looked very different from the last time Amaterasu laid eyes upon the young man known as Naruto Uzumaki. Her eyes roamed his form and took note of the obvious curse that was inflicted, along with the carved Anachian and Latin runes, within the patches of bare skin that were done visible, done by a very powerful angel from what she sensed. What got both women wary the most was the power that radiated off of him, it was so suffocating. Amaterasu could barely sense his chakra as the raw demonic and even angelic essence she felt from him was so strong, almost intoxicating really. Naruto smiled to them as it was a calm smile, held no ill will, but at the same time, no pure joy either. Gone was the pure boy she had sent here, in his place was a changed man, just what had happened since she lost track of him. Naruto waited for a bit as he gauged their reactions. He got a little kick out of Amaterasu's shock and worry as the other lady, a real beauty that he could sense was powerful in her own right, and already he was wanting to be her friend. What he liked foxes, the shadows from within the portal, were gonna repeat their words again, as he rolled his eyes and turned back to it. Alright, guys, they got the joke, stop showing off, go back to what you were doing earlier. He snarked out as a bunch of giggling could be heard from them. Amaterasu heard how much different he sounded, gone with a scratchy teen voice, and in with a mature and charming tone. Was it natural or the result of what happened to him? Naruto made a shooing motion before grabbing the edges of the portal and closing it shut as the air returned to normal, and he turned back to the ladies. Sup, Ami, been a while, how have you been? He asked nonchalantly as in an instant, she was before him, hands on his shoulders as she looked him over, turning him around, lifting his cloak and pulling at his clothes to see the damage of the demon curse had done to his body. What happened to you? She asked as she turned him to face her, looking up as he was a giant now compared to her. Naruto shrugged and fixed his clothes a bit from her prying hands. Oh, you mean this, eh? Nothing really. Got turned into a kid and dragged into some cult stuff, and then dumped into underworld during the latter half of the Devil's Civil War. Doing fine really. Got to change this gift into something sweet, and been busy with home building and renovation since. Sides working favors for people for stuff, he answered offhandedly. This only served to make her worry more. No, that's not what was supposed to happen. You were supposed to arrive here in Kyoto. We would have you train and grow your powers here, she divulged as now Naruto was a bit confused. Wait, so I wasn't supposed to end up in England and get touched and experimented on by the church? He asked as she nodded as he hummed in thought, then shrugged again. Ah well, won't be the first time things don't go as planned, he remarked as Amaterasu was about to protest, but a finger came to her lips as he got her to relax with the other hand on her shoulder. I'm fine, Amaterasu, really, sure, this all looks bad, but it's really not. Now how about we focus, and you can introduce me to your lovely friend, he said as she took a breath to calm down. He could have sworn he saw a few strands of her hair move and glow white like wolf ears for a moment, but did not comment as they turned to Yasaka, who was sizing up Naruto as she stood up now, letting him really take in the view as he let out a low whistle in compliment. Tsunade Senju, eat your heart out. Where was I? Oh yeah, Lady Yasaka, I would like you to meet the esteemed Naruto Uzumaki. Back home he is a very powerful shinobi, and here well she trailed off as she was still unsure of his current state. Yasaka bowed in greeting as Naruto did the same, with one hand and a fist over his heart and the other to the side, and spreading his cloak a bit when she offered her hand to shake. She was surprised when he went to kiss her knuckle. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Yasaka, Naruto Uzumaki, at your service. He smiled with a wink as she cold and suppressed the small smile on her lips as she was already finding him intriguing and a charmer. Kyoto's Capitol building. Naruto was reading a magazine as he waited before Yasaka's office to report the success of the assignment she had him run. Busting a sex trafficker who had yakai men, women and children in his collection, as the guy was a real sleazeball. Yasaka wanted him dealt with, as she legally could not touch him, as he was protected by some Yakuza families who had dirty cops on their peril. Luckily, she knew who to turn to for help. The doors to her office opened as a young noble stormed out, most likely miffed at being rejected again, as it seems that they just walled let up in trying to win her hand and marrying the beautiful Kitsune. The noble spotted Naruto and shot him a dirty look as he was a foreigner, and somehow always able to be on her good graces, and a friend who did not want in her kimono like every other young man. Naruto just gave a wave and flirty wink as the noble scurried off while he entered the office, as Yasaka greeted him with a smile. I take it the lowly scum has been taken care of, Naruto? She asked as he summoned a rather thick manila folder along with a few laptops and other evidence that tied the main culprit and his various connections and clients. He set them on her desk as she skimmed through the folder, as it also held the photos and names of all the yakai he has been trafficking around, as she frowned in disgust. Elsewhere, the hell? The individual in question grasped his head as he came to, barely remembering what had happened. All he knew that was he approached by some anonymous source, offering to buy a few bad bitches for his dealings through an email. plus the amount they offered was too good to pass up. Next thing he knew, upon arriving to the location of the transaction with a few of his men and some of his finest slaves, was his men being dragged into shadows, and soon enough his vision was obscured by darkness, gun hand broken and knocked out cold by a hard right hook. The only thing he heard before blacking out was a masculine voice with a southern drawl. "Well, ain't you a cute little SWEETHEART." He felt blood from a nice cut on his temple as his Yakuza suit was stripped off, leaving him in his underwear. The man was starting to panic as he found himself in some old forest. The sky itself was a rainbow of colors as his surroundings looked very haunting. This was no normal forest. The tendons in his legs were cut as he heard a sharp whistle echo out through the forest, and he really started to panic. He screamed in fear as a pack of demonic wolves known as Giramans emerged from the shadows, snarling and frothing at the mouth in vicious hunger. The fiendish beasts set upon and tore him apart as they satiated their hunger for human flesh as he struggled and screamed till the end. Back with the duo, took care of the man in charge, also took the liberty of getting the victims that he had with to the closest hospital. Once again, you have ways of taking out those that can't be touched by the law. Kyoto thanks you for your services, my friend. She thanked him as she buzzed in some security guards to take the evidence to the proper authorities and have them make arrests and provide aid for the recently freed slaves. The Kitsune Empress folded her hands under her chin and smiled to him as he replied, "No problem, Yusaka. Just doing my part and making sure Kyoto and its people are safe and sound." Naruto smiled back as he took a liking to Kyoto and even made some major enhancements to the ley lines with his mastery of seals, of course, running the ideas by Yusaka and the Shinto trio as they were amazed by what he could do with sealing arts. Not to mention a few other upgrades and additions to the city's security and defenses based on the stuff back home. You say that, yet you've done much more than that. If anything, it's almost like you have taken a shine to my home and got settled in. Not that I'm complaining, as you are the most interesting person I have had the pleasure of meeting and befriending," she added as Naruto sheepishly scratched his chin. She was not wrong on that as he did get attached to her home pretty damn quick. "Must have been the great Raymond. You got me, I just like the place, that and the food is awesome." He gave a short answer as really, he was just stalling, and she picked up on it, curiosity filling her head as she's known him for some time, and he always was upfront with what was on his mind. That was one reason she valued his friendship, his blatant honesty and optimism. "Something on your mind, Naruto?" she asked him as he got up and got a cup of water from the machine. "Come on, Naruto, you've faced life or death situations and fought people that wanted to destroy or enslave the world. You can do this." He took a deep breath and turned to Yusaka with a curious look. You want to grab a bite sometime, Yusaka?" he finally asked as the question caught her off guard for a second as she registered what he just said. "Are you asking me out, Naruto?" She couldn't help but prod with a small smile as she was now wondering where this was coming from, and here she thought he was uninterested. "No, I mean yes. I mean if you want to and aren't swamped by paperwork." He scratched the back of his neck as he really wasn't used to something like this. First time for everything, right? She thought about it and did admit to herself that he was a handsome and powerful man who was just a treasure trove of chakra-based abilities and skills that surprised even her, and she prided herself on her skill with Jujutsu and chakra. She would be lying if she said she wasn't interested in learning from him and perhaps getting to know more about the young man that Amaterasu had brought to her home. How does tomorrow evening sound? I should have everything done by then." She gave a warm smile as she was taking this chance and watched his expression shift from nervous to happy. "Really? That's great, I'll pick you up by 5 and we can go wherever you want." Naruto opened the door to exit as Yusaka leaned back in her chair in a happy mood, thinking about where this new development and how things could go. Outside the office, Naruto leaned against the doors and let out an exhale before pumping his fist with a bright grin as he left. Flashback end. Naruto's car blazed down the roads of the underworld, taking a highway that branched off into a forest. As he pressed a button on the dashboard, the vehicle glowing with power before it and him blipped out of existence in the underworld. Fast and convenient way to go to the human realm without being followed as the cover of the forest helped. Kyoto, Japan. Naruto and his ride reappeared coming out of a forested lone road as he drove to Kyoto, pulling up to the checkpoint as he showed his ID to the guard who then let him through. He pulled into the bustling town and got out of his car and desummoned it, putting the briefcase of money away in his jacket before taking a back alley and hopping to the roofs. A simple invisibility spell, and he was dashing across the city roofs as it took a short time to reach the Capitol building and dropped in front of the gates, waving to the guards as they recognized and bowed as he saluted in response while walking past. He made his way up the building and was at the doors to the main office of the current ruler of Kyoto, was he spotted the receptionist reading a book. "Hard at work, I see," he snickered as he recognized the book by the color and cover. He knew keeping and publishing Jiraiya's books to continue the series in this world would pay off. The receptionist, a Tengu, squawked in embarrassment and put the book away as they addressed him. "Ah, Lord Uzumaki, so good to see you're back in town. How was your trip?" the avian asked as he shrugged as he made his way to the doors and grabbed the handle. "Nothing special, just another successful hunt." "She in a meeting?" The Tengu shook his head as he replied. She actually just got finished with her lunch and is taking a break if I'm certain. You're free to waltz in. He motioned as Naruto smirked and did that. Try not to get caught reading on the job. He snarked as he closed the door behind him and smiled as he picked up the light snores coming from the currently sleeping woman at her desk. He had to hold back a snicker as he was drawing a comparison between her and Swand. That woman always slept on the job, or drank, or even both when Shizune was not looking. He silently walked closer as he saw the ever-beautiful Yusaka was hunched over her desk, arms and one of her tails acting as a pillow to rest her head on, moving around the desk without any sound being made. His hands gently moved her so that she was leaning against her chair and head facing up to expose her neck. The lovely golden quipu necklace adorned her neck and collar as it was an anniversary gift from him during the night Kunu was conceived and they cemented their relationship. Leaning in as he gave a glance to her peaceful expression to see she was still out, his head moved closer as his mouth opened, teeth shifting into a mouthful of sharp monster's fangs as he was just gonna take a sip, inching closer to her delicate neck. Just as he was about to sink his fangs in, she reacted as her eyes were not fully closed like he believed, nor did he pick up a small smile that graced her lips. Before fangs could meet flesh, Yusaka's hand shot out and grabbed him by the scruff of his jacket, tossing him across the room and against the wall as he collapsed with a grunt and then took a summoned water balloon to the face. "So, I see your day is going well, honey," he commented wryly as he got up and walked over, pulling a chair in and sitting down before Yusaka. The kitsune smiled as she got up and walked over to Naruto, sitting on his lap as her hands wrapped around his neck with a smile. "It's well, better now that you're back from work, dear. Now what did I say about leaving hickeys on my neck when I'm busy in the office?" she asked as she leaned in and pecked him on the lips as his hands rested on her waist. He just grinned and replied as not everyone in Kyoto was fond of their PTA. "You know damn well I don't care what the Council of Elders thinks of us, not their business that we both fell in love, got married and had our adorable daughter," he said as Yusaka just hugged Naruto with a sigh as she replied. "That's true, and while I always love your affectionate reminders, I don't need them constantly whining about how unprofessional I look with them visible." They both rolled their eyes at that, as clearly many of the council would be more focused on something much more prominent about her than a few hickeys around her neck and collar. She nestled her face into his neck as she inhaled his scent, always enjoying the warmth of his chakra as he was like the sun on a cool day. "They'll get over it, not like they're your boss, they answer to you. Now well I would love nothing more than to stay and cuddle. Your lunch break is almost over and I'm going to go pick Kunu up from school." He glanced to the clock on the wall as Yusaka's ears flattened as her cuddling was cut short, but she let go and got up, turning to her desk. She was grabbed by the shoulder and turned around as Naruto's lips met her, and she grabbed the sides of his face as their kiss turned to making out with his arms wrapping around her back and lifting her up as her feet kicked, splitting apart after few moments as she had a satisfied look and patted his cheek as they separated. "You better go get our little girl before I lock the door and ride you all afternoon, Naruto," she threatened as he snickered and moved, Yusaka jumping a bit as she felt his hand slap her butt as she took her seat again and got back to work, a happy smile while Naruto left and closed the door. Kyoto Academy. The final bell rung for the day as the kids were leaving the homeroom, dropping off their finished history reports on the teacher's desk. Kunu was last as she also had an apple in hand. "Here you go Mr. Sakai," she smiled and offered him the apple as her teacher accepted it with a smile. Mr. Jin Sakai was a handsome man with a tiny bit of gray in his beard and his hair in a bun. He also had a scar on his left cheek, which he said was from a childhood accident. He wore a dark blue three-piece suit, with the undershirt being a warm red along with a black tie. "Thank you, Kunu, that's very sweet of you. How are your parents?" he asked as he got to befriend Lady Yusaka and Lord Naruto, or Lord Uzumaki as he called him, much to Naruto's annoyance, as Jin found it funny the young man was not one for titles and the pomp, yet he was married to the current queen of Kyoto. "Mom is doing well, and I think dad will be back before the end of the week," she replied as he looked at the cover of her report with interest. "The Forbidden Love of the Sengoku Jidai, Sanada Yukimura and Lady Chacha. Looks like she picked a rare topic for her assignment." He nodded and offered Kunu a box of Pocky from his desk as thanks and sent her on her way. "You run along now, little one, don't want to keep your mother waiting." He smiled as her tail wagged at the treat and she ran off with backpack in hand. Kunu made it out to the school gates as she looked around before heading into an alley nearby. She focused chakra to her legs and jumped, quickly getting to the roof as she looked around, deciding on where to go. Make a trip to her favorite snack store and pick up some treats for Shippo or head straight back home. She hopped off the roof with a decision when she suddenly was stopped midair and hoisted by her school sweater, dangling over the alley as she heard a familiar voice that made her smile. "Now where are you running off to, little lady? Not even gonna give your old man a hug?" "Papa?" With a small blur, Kunu escaped his grasp and was instantly hugging his torso, arms and legs wrapped around Naruto as her tails wagged. Naruto smiled as he hugged her back and patted her head. Kunu rubbed her cheek into his chest as she soon let him go and hoped down. "How was your trip? Did you bring me a souvenir and cool photos?" she asked excitedly as Naruto reached into a pocket and brought out a little rock, carved into the shape of a small rabbit. The rock itself was a sleek silver with gold cracks running along the carving. He placed it in her hands as the small kitsune marveled at the item. Pull this little thing out of a passing asteroid on the way back, hope you like it, got your mom something nice too, but that's a surprise, now what were you up to? He asked as Kunu put the gift in her pocket while replying. It's cute, like those bunnies Lady Kagaya has with her. I was gonna go get some treats for Shippo when you caught me, maybe get some instant ramen for you, she said as Naruto put out his hand, Kunu grabbing it, and with a pull, she was now on his back and hanging on as Naruto took to rooftop travel, as they soon came down to the sidewalk before a rather lavish looking store. No, it'd be more like an emporium with how decorative it was, a large sign hanging above the entrance that read, The Khan's Delights. Kunu got down and grabbed his hand, leading her dad inside, as both their noses filled with a sense of varying foods across the globe. The place was huge, 2 stories and a buffet kitchen in the back. The second floor was filled with aisles of various snacks, ingredients for meals and so on. The bottom floor had said kitchen and tables set for indoor dining, food bars and a small bakery for fresh desserts and the likes. Hello, welcome to the Khan's Delights, what can I get for you two today? The staff at the booth asked. The boss in today? Naruto replied as the lady nodded and went to get him as he looked to Kunu and nodded to her, making her smile as she ran off to go grab snacks and foods. Naruto did not have to wait long as the owner to the place walked over. He was a handsome man with a large frame and decked out in jeans, boots, a dress shirt and a dark brown jacket, Mongolian artistry along it. Hair cut short like his beard and a scar along his cheek. Good day to you, Naruto, how goes things? He asked with a smile as they shook hands. Doing good, Cotton, just brought Kunu in to pick up Shippo's treats, any news abroad? Naruto asked as Cotton Khan chuckled. His store sourced many of its products from around the globe, as he did a world tour a while back to sample various culinary delights. Nothing fascinating, the usual affairs of the devils and angels. I did catch some word about some young man going about making a team of heroes, but nothing worthwhile. He shrugged as Naruto took that into account when Kunu came back, arms full of snacks and other foods. Cotton smiled at the fox girl as she reached into her backpack and brought out the box of Pocky from her teacher. Offering it to him, in return, he brought out a small paper bag of bones from the kitchens for her little friend to enjoy. You are too kind, little one, give my thanks to Mr. Sakai. He chuckled as they were friends, sorta. Naruto paid for the items as he waved them goodbye and returned to his office. Is Sokka's home? Shippo, daddy's back. Kunu called out as the duo came in and Naruto began putting away the food. The sound of paws running through the house was heard before a rather large fox, about the size of a Shiba Inu, collided with Naruto and yipped and jumped at his legs. Naruto smiled and petted the fox's ears as it purred a bit. The creature was unlike any normal fox. Its eyes clearly, and that its fur was a dark blue, yet the fur of its face was snow white. The most interesting was the light stripes along the thick tail, giving the illusion that it had 9 tails, but it was just one large bushy tail. Sup buddy, did you miss me? He asked as the fox nipped at his fingers before being distracted by a wonderful smell, looking at Kunu as she had a rib bone form a cow in hand, and it was quickly snatched as the fox ran off to his bed. Kunu just laughed at Shippo running off, and she put the bag on the counter by the fridge. Naruto took off his jacket and gloves, revealing his toned and tattooed arms and painted nails. You got homework? He asked as she shook her head no, alright, you can go play your games. Kunu hugged her dad before running off as Naruto munched on an apple and went to the study to see what he could help with before Yasaka got home. Kunu got to her room as she set her school stuff away and placed dad's gift on her dresser, right next to a few other trinkets, one of them being a pair of dolls with pointy ears and dressed like maidens in red and white. She then hopped on her computer and booted up her copy of Civilization 6 to see how things were going, a smile on her face as she saw her BFF, Half-Blood Prince, was also on. It'd be several hours before Yasaka entered her home, slipping off her shoes and stretching her arms and shoulders before going to her room and changing her kimono out for simple tank top and sweatpants, letting her hair down and removing her necklace, catching the scent of dinner being made. She came to the kitchen and saw what Naruto was cooking. Inwardly she was salivating as Naruto proved to be an excellent chef, self-taught too, something he took upon himself a while back. Tonight's dinner was pan-fried sesame garlic tofu, along with a side of steamed rice and green tea. Kunu already had chopsticks and napkins in hands as she glided over and kissed Naruto on the cheek. Looks delicious, darling, she complimented as she got to enjoy the fruits of his culinary expertise, as did Kunu and Shippo. He smiled and offered her a piece as she snatched it from his fingers with her mouth and savored the flavor washing over her tongue. She grabbed their tea tray, while Naruto and Kunu got the dishes and chopsticks before heading to the living room. Huddling up on the couch as Kunu sat at her parents' feet while Yasaka sat beside Naruto, they watched a show while eating dinner as Yasaka rested her head on his shoulder. Dinner was finished as they dozed off one by one, watching the show as Naruto was the only one still up. "They'll never get used to this," he muttered to himself silently as he wiggled out of their hold and placed Shippo in Kunu's arms, Kunu in Yusaka's arms, and picked up Yusaka in his arms as he carried them to bed. He was still new to this whole family thing and liked to think he was doing a good job as he never had anyone growing up to learn from, if anything. He very much liked what he and Yusaka had created and would do anything to protect them. He would beat anyone's ass that tried to harm his family. He went to Kuna's room and dropped off both daughter and pet as he tucked them in with magic and then placed Yusaka in their bedroom, having to worm out of her ironclad grip as he kissed her forehead and went back to clean up the dishes. He finished and returned to her as he stripped to just his shirt and boxers and got in bed, letting the sleepy mother cling to her personal warmer as he hugged her waist, feeling her tails wrap around them and her arms grabbing his as he joined her in sleep. Night, Honey. The following morning, Yusaka was having a nice dream as she rolled to her side and snuggled her face into Naruto's chest. Naruto himself was awake as a convenient beam of light was coming through the blinds and on his eyes. He just rolled his eyes and grumbled as he could feel the divine energy in the sun's rays. "Come on, Ami, let a man sleep," he muttered out as he went to move, but Yusaka pushed him back down, trying again as one of her tails moved to boop him in the face. He knew what that meant as he felt her nails dig lightly into his torso the more he attempted to get out of bed. "Come on, Yusaka, I gotta make breakfast," he said as she wasn't letting him go easy, snuggling more as she wasn't a morning person, her head resting on his chest as she listened to his heartbeat. "5 more minutes," she mumbled out as Naruto just smiled. With a hand, he cupped her chin and brought her in for a kiss as this had Yusaka's hold on him falter and her tail swing, humming into the soft kiss as she was enjoying it too much to realize he got free, breaking the kiss as he stood up. She opened her eyes and pouted when she realized he tricked her and tossed a pillow at him. "Cheater," she huffed as Naruto laughed at her childish look as he leaned in and kissed her again, this time with more fervor as she placed her hands on his face, kissing turning to making out, dragging him back in the bed as Naruto loomed over Yusaka as his arms kept him from laying on her as their kiss broke again and he gave a foxy grin. "You know it never uhanging," he said as he got her blushing as she pushed him away and sat up to fix her hair. "Alright, Naruto, you're free to go," she replied with her own smile as she slapped his butt when he left. He put on some sweetpants he summoned and got to work, making Kuna's favorite, pancakes in the shape of animals with an omelette and juice. Wasn't long before the scent of the food had her running into the room and taking a seat, chanting pancakes, as he slid the plate over to her. Kunu thanked him before digging in as Shippo came in followed by Yusaka, who got herself some coffee Naruto was brewing. He made French toast, souffle omelette, thick-cut bacon and fruit for her as she thanked him with a peck on the cheek before sitting next to Kunu as they ate. "Can we have picnic later?" Kunu asked as she sipped her drink as Naruto and Yusaka smiled. "Course we can, after we both have our work finished for the day, sound good?" Her mom said as Kunu nodded and stole a strawberry from her plate. Naruto watched Yusaka give a fake shocked look in return by taking some of Kuna's omelette and he noticed Shippo stealing a bacon strip from his plate. The Fox family finished their food as they went about getting ready for the day as Naruto was gathering his clothes from yesterday while Yusaka was getting ready for a shower. "I'd love to stay and join, but I got some of my work in my jacket," he said as Yusaka nodded in understanding as she gave him a hug and her tails wrapped around his waist. "I know, last thing I want is Kunu seeing that stuff. Shess getting more curious as she gets older about why you vanish," she commented as Naruto returned her hug and rested his chin on her head, one hand rubbing her lower spine as she knew why he took his leave and left the world for amounts of time, the longest being about a year and a half. Naruto sighed as he understood her concern and how his work would affect them, especially since they both wanted to be good parents and made promises to each other and to Kunu. "That's kids for you, when Shess old enough I can talk to her about it, I promise. Also, I got you something." He broke their hug and reached into his jacket and brought out a small blue box. As he let Yusaka take it, she opened it and couldn't help but gaze in wonder at the lovely bracelet, a silver chain that had a glimmering opal in the center, the gem being carved into a moon. She looked to him as he winked, reaching up to grasp his face and give him a big smooch as she set the jewelry on the sink. "It's beautiful. Not as much as you, my queen," he added as she giggled and let him go after slapping his chest in response. "Charmer'll see you when we're both done with errands today." He nodded as he walked over the vanity mirror in the room and placed his hands on it, making it shimmer as the glass cracked and surged out, revealing a shimmering tunnel of inky blackness. He walked in as he turned back to face his wife, only seeing her teasing him with a blown kiss as she started stripping for her shower. The mirror refixing as a crack of light appeared in the void before him and he left through that with the crack vanishing. The hellhole. The ocean was calm, eerily calm. In fact, around a landmass, there was a stillness to the normally never-ending movement of the sea that was unnatural. Could possibly have to do with a large pale moon framing a castle that sat smack dab on a large plot of land in the middle of the ocean, with a visible mountain range in the distance. The castle itself was massive and majestic, designed in the shape of a hand. The Gothic architecture fit perfect with the stained glass and the overall motif of the hand of evil, reaching out of the ocean of blood, of course, the massive moon making it so the clouds surrounded the sky and casting an ominous crimson glow over the whole thing. It had a hellish beauty to it, almost like it belonged in the underworld amongst the devils and all their pomp and grandeur, but that was not the case for this castle. In fact, this place, this world was not even in any of the three worlds, the heavens, the underworld and earth that made up the trinity of draconic deus. Naruto Uzumaki made sure of that when he created the castle and claimed the world as his own territory. Naruto came through the portal and onto a large balcony that led to his private chambers in the castle, somewhere near one of the large towers. Walking into the large room, he set his jacket on the huge circular bed in the middle of the room, which had multiple pillows of many shapes and a soft velvet blanket in a shade of orange, before he started stripping his PJs off while heading to the connecting bathroom. Once nude, his figure was revealed to be very in shape and strong, seems like he's been hitting the gym. Another thing to note was the various tattoos he had on his skin. The most notable was the Lord tattoo going over his collar framed by stars, as his left arm from the shoulder down was covered in a sleeve tattoo, displaying a conniving fox hunting a family of rabbits. He had a rose tattoo over his heart framed by Enochian and Latin runes, a bit similar to the one Ria's now had, but while hers was red, his was multicolored with red, blue and purple. On his right arm he had only a few. On his forearm was a pentagram flanked by demon wings and a cross flanked by angel wings. He had several others, an alpha and omega Greek symbol overlapping on his wrist, a Norse protection stave on his shoulder, and Tomo swirls within a Torii gate on the side of his neck. On his back, he had a large tattoo, the infamous Uzumaki swirl. The crest of his extinct clan was front and center, surrounded by 10 skulls, one for each tailed beast, as the 10th one was a human skull, with a pair of horns sprouting from its head. A halo between the horns and fangs filled the mouth as the eye sockets had both red and blue lights, the kanji for eternity within the Uzumaki crest to top it off. Now one might wonder why Naruto would ever get tattoos on himself. Well, it was simple honestly, they helped tell his life experiences and his valued friendships with various gods and pantheons he had and continued to help and work with over the years since he arrived at DxD. He even went as far as to befriending several gods as they got along and helped him with this project of his. The world he inhabited as he took a barebones planet, they paid him for all his favors and work and breathed life into it through his chakra, shaping and forming with their help as the once struggling world that barely had life was now teeming with it. Quite unique life that couldn't be found anywhere else either. Shippo was from this world as he was a rare little critter, according to the local wildlife guide by the natives of this world. Another thing of note was that this world was also secretive, as in not everyone, besides the gods he worked with knew of it, especially those of the three factions, except for Rias and Gasper, as they were a few of his adorable students. He stepped into his large bathroom and tossed his stuff in the hamper, while the shower was turned on, instantly heating and fogging up the room as he stepped in and got to work cleaning up. As he worked a body wash over himself, his skin started shedding. Flaking away would be best to describe it, as he wasn't even bothered by this, revealing the familiar crystalline growth that covered most of his body. His blessing and curse, the normal skin with tattoos, was more or less an illusion to cover up his real look, said flaking skin fading away into magic particles as it landed on the shower floor, not even remaining to be swallowed into the shower drain. The crystal growth had come a long way since it was first implanted in him, and he was dumped unceremoniously into the underworld. His feet, shins, more than half of his thighs, hips, entire torso, parts of his arms and up to his neck were engulfed by the changes. His groin, butt and parts of his arms and thighs were untouched along with his fingers, the border being inked with the runes done by some holy help when he called upon a while back with that card. Over his heart was the same multicolored rose symbol seen before, the cover pic for the story, but this was pure crystal compared to just inked art, as the rose pulsed energy with the beat of his heart. There were shades of blues and greens along the vast reds and purples, running along his changed body, as he was more than just a human turned demon, and not the dumb reincarnation method with the evil pieces, or its heavenly counterpart known as brave saints. Despite the looks, he really wasn't in any pain, having long gotten used to the feel, and sure his skin was now hard as crystal. He could still move freely and had full autonomy too. If the outsides looked off, then he didn't have to say what things looked like on the inside. He worked the shampoo in his hair before stretching his arms and back, some pops coming out as his large wings emerged with a flap as they stretched out too, a pair of large horns sprouting from his forehead too. His wings were too thick to be the thin devil wings, closer to the leathery bat wings with their size and girth, like him. They showed signs of stained glass crystals growing along the wing membranes and fingers. Something interesting was that around the talons of the wings, small patches of feathers grew around said talons, some of them being crystallized, as they looked close to the feathers found in the wings of angels, both pure and fallen. his crystal horns were generally a deep red, almost purple with shades of blue energy pulsing along the cracks. He also grew to his true height of 7 feet, another side effect of his new looks and powers. He finished his shower, his horns and wings retreating into him. His height shrank to normal as dried off as he went back into his room, snapping his fingers as shadows and smoke condensed around his naked form and formed into his black, gold and red outfit, his emperor attire as he was lord and master of the castle and its many denizens. Picking up his jacket, he went through the pickets and brought out a couple pocket notebooks, along with the vial of phoenix tears Riaz gave him earlier. He put his jacket in the closet and vanished with a simple teleport spell with things in hand. He appeared within a large laboratory that was bustling with various assistants and demons, not devils, actual demons that were bound to the head alchemist that owned the place. He walked along the corridor, not minding the various workers bowing to him as he passed. He came to a door and entered the personal study of Alfred, finding said man taking a nap as he was an elderly man, decked out in long old robes that had seen better days and a grey cloak to go with it. His grey messy hair and beard added to his old looks with his sunken eyes being closed, and his snoring filled his study. Naruto walked over and picked up a hefty book on animal biology and evolution and proceeded to drop it on his desk. The ensuing noise startling Alfred awake from his sleep as he gave a withering glare to Naruto, who smiled back. "I see you're still being a little shit," he grumbled out as he sat up in his large chair. Alfred was found in the underworld harassed by some arrogant devils sometime after Naruto arrived. He killed the devils and disposed of their bodies, as Alfred remembered him from their time on Earth, and found out Naruto adapted to the curse far easier than expected. Thus he pledged himself to Naruto's service to atone as they kept themselves busy over the centuries. Now, Alfred was the grand alchemist of the Hellhold and one of Naruto's close friends. "Morning to you too, old man, got something for you," he said as he placed a vial of tears on his desk, making Alfred's eyes light up as he recognized what he was seeing. With a hand wave, he had a microscope float over from one of the many shelves of his tools and books. "I take it Ms. Gremory won her match against the Phoenix Heir. She's proven herself quite the student of yours," he commented as he was about to uncork the vial and study the legendary liquid of the phoenixes, but paused when Naruto's hand went over his. "I found Miriam." That got Alfred to stop what he was doing as he missed his surrogate daughter. Well, initially she was one of many brought in for the Shardbender experiments. Alfred had become akin to a father figure as he watched over and took care of the kids and ultimately tried to stall and outright sabotage the whole thing as he ultimately turned against his fellow guild members, wanting to save the children from the pain and suffering. But he was killed days before the rituals by the guild for his treason. A huge part of why he sided with Naruto was his guilt in the project and its aftermath, and through Naruto, he saw a chance at atoning for his sins. "Where? Is she alive? Is she safe? Or else, turns out a bit of my luck rubbed off on her," Naruto replied as Alfred realized Miriam found herself within the home of one of the devil leaders of the underworld. He had his suspicions as he heard about the newborn of House Gremory and upon closer look, could glimpse his Cambion heritage during a trip to the realm, which intrigued the alchemist as the pure-blooded devils frowned upon mingling their bloodlines with lowly apes to his knowledge. He let out a breath and sat back in his chair as he took in this information, a smile on his old face as he wondered how she was doing. Brying. His thoughts were interrupted as the rotary dial phone on his desk went off as he glanced to it, then Naruto as he smiled. "It'll let you two catch up," he said as he walked out of the room, and Alfred brought the phone to his ear. "Miriam, is that you?" He began after a moment to compose himself. He had so many things and apologies he wanted to say to her. "It's good to hear your voice, Alfred." Naruto appeared within the trophy room of the castle. Well, his trophy room, as he had developed the hobby of keeping spoils of many fights to display. Though he never showed this room off to others, the room itself was large and circular, as many things lined the walls in various displays. Broken weapons, holy and unholy armors, the wings of several angels, fallen and devils, several skeletons of magic creatures and beasts and even a few things from some gods that he fought. Like some of Locke's hair. Funny fight that devolved cause Loki accused him of trying to steal his title of mischief maker. There was even the Horn of Great Red there too, and that was its own story of how that came to be. Along with the trophies was an alchemy station as Naruto too liked to practice the art and had a huge shelf system with a various assortment of alchemy ingredients within labeled drawers too, ranging from common materials to the downright nigh impossible to acquire. He had a few diagrams along the wall, each having the full model of an angel and devil and various points and notes on what to harvest from them for ingredients, like their wings, blood, essence and so on. What? He studied hard on alchemy and knew that one has to have means of getting the proper ingredients for stuff. He tapped a closed display case next to the station as it opened to reveal a collection of human skulls, horned human skulls, on display. The golden label on the bottom read Otsutsuki as he brought out the black notebook and opened to a page as he tore it out and with some magic, summoned its grisly contents onto the desk. Several severed heads of Otsutsuki clansmen gazed back or would have had their eyes not been gouged out by yours truly, their expressions of agony and horror, grabbing one. He picked up a tool as a small energy blade sprang to life from the tip and got to work shaving the hair off before placing the head in a bowl of flesh-eating beetles he summoned as they picked the item clean inside and out of meat, giving the now empty skull back, using another energy tool to polish the skull. He finished and jabbed the skull onto a small pike on the wall as he did the same with the other heads, taking time to work them all over as he examined his handiwork. His rather meager collection was steadily growing as he had a smile on his face. Got some more, but still no luck on finding their home turf, he muttered as he cleaned his hands off and sent the beetles back where he had called them from. Hess discovered a few things about his elusive progenitor clan that kept to the stars. 1. They liked to travel in pairs, planting the divine trees and harvesting them once they sucked a world dry of all life and left it a barren husk. 2. They were arrogant as all hell, believing themselves to be superior to any and all races they came across and devoured through their gardening. It kinda got him happy when he took their lives and destroyed their notions of superiority. And 3. Despite their narcissistic views and huge egos, they clearly had ways to make sure to keep the clan hidden in the event a clansman was ever captured. A small pressure point at the stem of the brain induced by intense trauma and or death had their own power just fry their brain of any and all consciousness and information. They could self-inflict it too if they had to, leaving him unable to pick their minds with a mind-reading jutsu. If he could get his hands on a live one, then that'd make his job a lot easier. It's challenging enough with space being so fucking vast that Hess had several occasions come up with no leads. From what he surmised, the clan was keeping themselves hidden due to either being small, like only numbering in the hundreds, and or that they feared their creators that they betrayed so long ago and stole from during their mass rebellion. They were originally the servants of the combined collective of the Shinto, Hindu and Buddha religions. Their rebellion had the gods label them as traitors with report on side orders to exterminate. Course it was easier said than done for lesser than divine beings, as they proved very dangerous. Naruto closed the display case of skulls and cleaned off his work desk, summoning the crystal shard he got from Riser and placing it in the middle of the alchemic sigil carved into the table surface. He placed the ruby from Riser's flames at 12 o'clock, a few phoenix feathers that he snagged from Riser's pet familiar. Don't ask how he got them at 6 o'clock. He went over to his materials as 2 drawers opened up and 2 more materials floated out and onto the desk, a small vial of pure demon blood at 9 o'clock, the real stuff, not the diluted devil blood that had its properties changed over years of magical evolution from demon to devil, and at 3 o'clock was a small piece of obsidian, not just regular obsidian, but the stuff that could be found deep underground in the underworld, close to the core that made the world of the devils. A small glow of power emanated from within the small rock. With all the proper ingredients ready, he placed his hand above the sigil, and a few sparks of red lightning had the whole thing light up and glow. The items shook as they started to warp and get sucked into the center with the shard. With a flash of light, the process finished, and he stared at the yellow shard that was glowing like a mini light source. The other ingredients gone and absorbed into it as it was now stronger than ever. He picked it up and walked a bit from the table, tossing the shard forward as it enlarged to the proper size, about as big as he was tall. It floated and aimed before spearing through his torso as he held his ground with a grunt, his hand shooting forward and grasping a part of the shard as he shoved it deeper, and with a pulse of yellow energy, the crystal shattered and was imbued into his body. Not a trace of injury from the impalement as he rolled his joints and let out a huff. Never could get used to the feeling consuming a new supernatural power or ability. Felt like sharp claws raking along his bones. On a whim, he summoned a kukri knife and carved open the fleshy part of his own throat. The fresh wound healed over instantly from the fatal gash. He licked his blood off the knife and de-summoned it. Phoenix regeneration, NICE, thanks Riser. He did a few more checkups around the castle, just seeing how things were going as he was approached by a demoness who whispered something unintelligible in his ear. As Naruto hummed and nodded to the news as she flew off, Naruto entered his study and saw the stack of paperwork as he smiled and summoned some clones, sitting down in his chair as they got to work going through various requests, contracts, purchases and so on. Despite him being the lord of the castle, he let everyone run their own things smoothly and had the final word on approvals and stuff. Once finished, he returned to his private chambers as he put some things away and just sat on a recliner overlooking the sea as he summoned one of his guitars from his wall mounts and was just strumming a small tune. Music was another hobby he picked up. After a while, he sensed a tear in the air before him as Usaka, Kunu and Shippo emerged with picnic basket and supplies in hand. All caught up dear, now let's enjoy all this food I cooked up. Usaka smiled as Naruto set his guitar aside and got up. Sacred Pinnacle. The weather was perfect as clouds filled the sky and the sun shined over the whole mountain range. The family of 4 had a large blanket set out and were enjoying the lovely food Usaka had whipped up after her errands. The basket was full of onigiri, sushi, bento boxes, spam onigizeru, and even some other foods from around the world like hummus, pita bread, cheesecake and pulled pork sandwiches. She blamed Naruto rubbing off on her with his cooking, as he liked to surprise her and Kunu with doing dishes around the world. That, and the Khan's delights was proving to be a huge hit with the people of Kyoto. Hisaka was wearing something different from her regular kimono when out in public, or the casual top and sweats in her own home. She had on a long skirt, sandals, a sleeveless blue and silver blouse and a cardigan over that along with her necklace. She also had brought along a canvas and painting tools, as it was a hobby she picked up a while back. And the world they were in had so many great views, gorgeous vistas and things to draw out as she liked to practice. In her hands was brush and palette, as she was going for a nice canvas painting of the Misty Peaks, a mountain range that was very close to their current location, the sweet village of Yukumo barely visible in the distance down below. There you go, Shippo, don't eat too fast. Kunu fed Shippo some jerky she brought along from her previous snack shopping, as the little kitsune was also casually clothed, jeans, shoes, a frilled skirt, a pink shirt and a denim jacket over it. Her shirt had best girl written on the front as she also had a bracelet. She was feeding her pet and also playing on her portable game system as she looked over to see her dad munching on sandwich and gazing to see Isaka's work. His emperor attire had morphed to boots, black leather tights and a mesh shirt with a red biker jacket over it. Finishing the look was fingerless gloves over his hands as his illusion spell was back on. "This is great, honey," he complimented as Isaka flashed him a smile as one of her tails dipped into the basket and took out a pork sandwich to enjoy. He walked over and laid an arm over her shoulders as he examined her work. Feels like it's missing something." He rubbed his scruffy chin and then snapped his fingers, giving out a whistle that echoed out through the mountains. As a small gust of wind picked up, a large section of clouds shifted and swirled before a large serpentine-like creature emerged from them, its twin golden horns glimmering in the sunlight as it let out a shrill cry in greeting. Isaka's ears perked up as she realized just what she was seeing, and she started painting the beautiful creature within her art, surrounded by clouds as she managed to get it in before the creature retreated into its misty cover. "Beautiful," she whispered out as she set her brushes down on the easel and gazed at where the creature emerged and retreated. It rare to see an Amatsu peacefully swimming through the clouds, as the elder dragons were reclusive and noted as being in bad moods whenever attempts were made to study them, thus wrecking any and all research parties that got close with their masterful control over storms. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Naruto's hand going for the pork sandwich she wanted. One of her tails smacked the back of his head and she judo flipped him onto the blanket, landing with a grunt as she walked over and got on him now as she grabbed his shirt and brought him up. "I know you're not trying to steal my food without asking nicely, right?" She raised a brow as he gave a cheeky grin in response, one hand coming up with her food as she just growled and snatched it back from him. Naruto's hands went to her hips as he slid along them. "You're so lovely when you're grumpy." Yasaka rolled her eyes at the cheesy compliment and leaned in to kiss him, running her hand along his scruffy beard as she pulled back and replied, "And you always resort to compliments to escape punishment, you keeping it again." She referred to his facial hair as she ran her hand along the stiff bristles before running her hands down over his tattooed chest and on his heart. "Been thinking about doing so. I know you don't like it too long, I'll keep it short and simple," he said with a shrug as they kissed again, pausing their pta as they heard Kunu make a puking noise. "You. Mom, Dad, don't trade cooties in front of Shippo," she shouted while covering said individual's eyes as he tilted his head in confusion. The parents shared a laugh at their daughter's expense and moved over as they got her with a kiss on each cheek, which had her gasp and start rubbing her cheeks in mortification to get rid of their cooties, glaring daggers at both of them. The cute family spent the next hour just enjoying the picnic, cloud watching and taking the time off their busy schedules. It'd be a while for them as they cleaned up, and Naruto summoned a private airship that they got aboard as he took the wheel. Well, this world wasn't as advanced as DxD. It had its own beauty and culture as the ship steered away from the pinnacle and took a direction. Isaka and Kunu loved to visit the many settlements, towns and cities dotted about and see the wonderful world Naruto had built. Konoha, Namika's residence. "Come on, you can do it, Himawari, come to mama." Hinata smiled as she knelt and held her hands out for her toddler daughter to come to her. Boruto helping Himawari stand as the young child was just learning to walk, a sucker in her mouth, as she gazed at mom and took baby steps, her brother helping her along. Kushina watched from the window of the kitchen as she had a smile on her face, but her eyes told a different story as they were filled with longing and pain. Watching her surrogate daughter and grandkids play caused her heart to ache as it reminded her of her baby boy that was no longer around. While she was thankful that she and Minato along with so many others got a second chance at the life they had snuffed out years ago, it just felt wrong when they heard the price of such an act. She was in the process of washing dishes as she watched them, her hand still holding the sponge and plate as Minato approached from behind. "Hey, you okay?" This snapped her out of her gazing as she gave him a smile and resumed her chore. "Yeah, just daydreaming." She felt his hand on her shoulder and felt his concern. Was it that obvious? She set things down and turned to her husband as they embraced in a hug, her face buried in his chest as he heard light sniffling. "I miss him too. There's not a day that goes by where I don't stop thinking about Naruto," he confessed as Kushina pulled from the hug a bit to look at her husband, and he wiped away the tears on her face. He placed a kiss on her forehead as Kushina sniffled a bit, nodding as she missed her son. How many nights did she fall asleep staring at the empty baby blanket she made for Naruto when she was carrying him? It was a cruel twist with how things were, robbed of becoming a mom, only to be brought back without her son, all that time forever lost. It's hard, I can't help but be reminded of him with all the old stuff in storage. It's not fair. Kushina hugged him again as Minato comforted her, opting to take a seat as he held her close. The two former parents actually wanted to try again, to have another kid. It's just that the memories of that night, Obito's grand plans, and how he ripped it all apart, kept coming back to haunt them. He got up and carried Kushina to their bedroom as he kept comforting her through her grief. Hinata taking her kids to the Hyuga compound that night was for the best as Minato and Kushina had their time, and with some encouraging words from Kurama, they planned to become parents again and start their family over. Naruto would always be in their hearts, and they would honor his memory with a little sibling. Thanks for watching.